URL for the patrons, the kings. 85,000, man. That's a hard one. Let me update that thumbnail real quick. Boom. All right, cool. We're so close, Jimmy. I feel like Patreon added some clicks to get things posted. It's not as easy.
Yeah, they definitely did for regular posts. Yep.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. $10, $16, $23. Email it to us. I'm gonna have to bring my supercharged thing over and keep my iPad plugged in while I use it as the monitor for myself, because it's rapidly dying. I'm in sore need of new technology. All right, man. I see concurrence growing, which suggests that the Kings are able to see this and all of that, Jimmy. We're plugged in, I believe. Yep, we're set. We're set. Let me get a water.
Oh yeah, will you grab me one?
Yes, sir.
Did I go first last week? Do you care?
Yeah, you go first this week.
On this?
On the Street Angel business. Good?
Yep. This video is brought to you by the books that we make. Street Angel Princess of Poverty is my next release from Image Comics. This will be in comic book shops late November. You need to pre-order that one now. It collects all the Street Angel comics that are not in Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive. I am self-publishing and will be selling these on jimrugg.com in late October, October 26th. These go on sale. True Crime Funnies, 3 non-fiction stories, 1986 zine celebrating the biggest year in comics history, and BW, a collection of black and white explosion and self-published titles from the 80s, and Hulk Grand Design, my contribution to the Grand Design history, is basically sold out. So pick that one up if you haven't already added it and your store still has a copy. You want to grab that. Ed Piskor's Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, collecting all of the Hip Hop Family Tree, plus 140 extra pages, is now in finer bookstores and comic shops everywhere in one beautiful volume. Add that to your shelf before it's too late. X-Men Grand Design, the trilogy, collecting all 3 volumes of X-Men Grand Design, will be coming to comic shops in late November. Pre-order that one now. And finally, Ed Piskor's Red Room, Trigger Warnings, and the Antisocial Network are both available wherever you buy books or comics. And a 3rd volume, Crypto Killers, will be out in January. And now back to the video.
Let me get the chat. Yeah, so Jimmy, I have 2 full batteries.
Yep.
Like portable batteries that are charging, so we could just yank one of those whenever you want to start to put some juice into your phone and stuff. Let's do Asher City, man. That's a good comic. Asher City 1 is going to be under the microscope. Jimmy, just give me a second real quick and let me pull up that chat. I was watching a lot of videos with those lapel mics, and they're real sharp, dude. Like I think that one of the bottlenecks of it is that you get 9-hour charge. Would they say 9-hour charge? So that'll be like fresh out the thing. At a certain point, it'll be 5-hour charge or something. Probably, you know what I mean? Like if it's that's the bottleneck, I think, and certainly for our purposes, I think it's going to be great. But it's not an outside microphone by any stretch. Like there's like poofy wind things that exist with those. We don't have. I didn't get that. Like I got just the basic. So I don't know if you could just buy that little nipple. But
would these be mics for recording like the regular episodes?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it'll be lapels, and because it's USB-C, and I couldn't find any mics that are just like that. But like this was high on the list. I watched about 5 videos.
Yeah.
And what's cool is, and the reason why I put off the Carl Barks is because we use my phone and we have the lapels, and they go for quite a distance. They're wireless. They go for quite a distance. So I'll be able to set up my camera on the tripod, and then we'll be able to get a good thing. I was actually thinking about doing our weeklies using that. And then if I have to do a test in private to see if the like live stream shows up on the YouTube website, which I think it does. If I do use the phone, you know what I'm saying? Like right now, how there's on the computer, there's like the dashboard and all that stuff. So, like if I could stop the stream remotely,
yeah.
Then because it's a way better quality video than what we're getting with this webcam. It's very, very sharp. So that's something that I want to figure out and play with. But man, they don't give you the power block for so it's just the wire for the USB-C. So like I'm just using my portable battery packs to fucking power my thing, because it's a double-sided USB-C. So it doesn't have the USB cable as we know it. Its 2 sides are the same USB-C, and so there's nothing for me to put it in. Wow. Yeah, it's real stupid. But I got this magnetic charger coming today, because it's like you just dock it. You don't even put a wire in the bitch.
I have one of those and I never use it. I don't know why I don't use it.
It's supposed to be way faster, Jimmy.
Yeah, sure.
It is for this bitch?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dude, you should bring that thing. Well, I'll have one, and then that should just... Psh.
I don't even use it at home. Like, I don't know why I don't use it. I just never got into...
Well, I mean, more importantly, like, we need a lot of juice, and it'll recharge your phone real quick in those, events. That, you know what I'm saying. Astro City 1, the OG Astro City 1.
We still doing this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I don't care if it goes over a little bit with, it doesn't matter. We'll let Captain Obvious is in the audience say, hey, what are you doing? It's almost Thanksgiving, man. You good?
Mm-hmm. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
And we are still in Kayfabe-tober. This is the list of prompts that we have provided this year. I've been enjoying everybody's artwork so far. If you follow Kayfabe-tober, be sure and tag us in your posts so that we can share some of the best art, and everybody can just see each other and what they're doing with all of these. I also want to remind everybody that we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. There are 3 different levels that will get you access to our videos early, and at the King Kayfaber level, you will get all of our videos first, as well as sitting in on the recording session. And we have seen books disappear from the aftermarket while we are recording. We call that the Kayfabe effect. Join at the King Kayfaber level, and you'll be the first one buying those books that could disappear or go up in price. And finally, we are a daily YouTube channel. We have about 1,500 videos in our catalog. You can search those on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Look for your favorite book, favorite artist, and see if we haven't covered them already. All right, today we are going to look at something of a superhero classic here. Astro City #1. This is the dollar reprint edition from Image First, but that makes it easy for everybody to pick this up if you haven't tried it already. I bought this originally when it came out in 1995. I was looking for something outside of Marvel and DC. Kurt Busiek, pretty hot writer in the 90s, and whenever he decided he was going to make his own superhero universe and superhero comic, I was on board for the first batch of these, and very high quality for I don't want to say self-published, but for a creator-owned superhero universe driven by a writer, pretty high standards were established from the get-go. So this is a book I read back in 95 and then just recently came across. I thought I had it still, but I got rid of it in my purge. But I recently picked up this $1 first issue, and I thought perfect for us to give it a look. We've covered it a little bit in Wizard Magazine.
Yeah.
We've covered 1995, so figured it was a good time to dip into it. And right off the bat, Alex Ross on the covers. Man, if you're gonna launch a superhero comic book, you could do a lot worse than Alex Ross doing character designs and cover art for you.
Yeah, totally, man. This is my, and it's a confession. This is my first time reading Astro City. Period. This is the first Astro City comic I ever read.
Interesting.
When it was coming out, I was angsty teen. Pretty much done with the Image guys. Really killed my love
Sure.
of the superhero, and the only monthly stuff I was grabbing really was from the big two was Preacher Comics, and then at this point, 95, you said, I'm starting to grab those complete Crumb comics. I'm filling in the gaps of my Love and Rockets collections, grabbing 8-Ball, like all of my. I still went to the comic shop every Saturday because mom could give me a ride and shit like that. But was prejudicial against superheroes because of just the abuses that I received during the breaking of Batman's back and all that stuff that's involved with that. That said, I'll scoop stuff up every now and then, and Kurt Busiek is a name that comes up often. Big fan of his work on Untold Tales of Spider-Man. Whenever I see those things out there and those Untold Tales, they retain their value. It cost $1 then. You can find them in the dollar bins now. But of all of the mainstream writers of that period of time, and I do not mean to, damn him with faint praise or whatever you want to cynically suggest, but he's the best writer of that crew that was sort of gaining prominence in the middle 90s when superhero comics were at their worst. You hear a bunch of names. Kurt Busiek transcends those guys, in my opinion. I think he makes fantastic comics. I think that sometimes he's bound by his utility players. So mileage may vary when it comes to the gestalt of the entire comic. But this was a pleasure to read. And I think he accomplished everything he needed with this particular issue.
He did a lot of stuff that was really smart at the time, too, from a sales point of view. One, you talked about Untold Tales of Spider-Man. Those were mostly self-contained stories. Maybe they were all self-contained stories.
Yeah.
At a time whenever so many comics, like you mentioned, the Batman breaking the back, is that 20 parts? You know what I mean? To try to get a story, you're buying all these issues. And Kurt is doing single issues. So you pick it up and get a complete story. And he carried that over into Astro City. And at a time whenever we're still in kind of the damage from Image, whatever effect they had in terms of superhero storytelling, Busiek was a guy that I remember was almost like, this is an independent superhero that the old timers selling the books at the shops would get behind.
Yeah.
This is something they would recommend.
Yeah, it's true.
They wouldn't give you too hard of a time if this is what you were buying.
Which also turned me off. It had nothing to do with Busiek or the crew. It was the old timers like angsty teen. I don't want to hear what your grandpa comics are right now, man. So it had that prejudice to me. I would call this maybe the best Superman story ever written in comics.
It's really good, and I did not have a great memory of this first issue from back in the day. Rereading it, I like it so much more now than I remembered liking it, and it'll be interesting to kind of get into some of those details as we go through some of the stuff I respond to.
Yeah, as a standalone comic, I think it that's the greatest function that it serves. It's kind of like how if Breaking Bad pilot episode was just a short film, it would be this incredible movie. This is an incredible kind of standalone comic. I think it accomplished all the stuff that Kurt wanted, but I don't know that it starts off Astro City a series as much as maybe he would have liked even.
It's interesting to think in a time whenever we were moving to trades, this would have been almost like a collection of short stories as opposed to like the graphic novel, the 6-parter that's one big story.
All these issues are self-contained?
I believe they are.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they are. At least for a while they were. At some point he may have started doing bigger stories, but I think like at least the first 6 issues they were like standalones.
I Dream of Flying, I swear that's Miracle Man.
Oh yeah.
That's the first like pages of the Miracle Man stuff.
Yeah, the flight thing is a big piece of superhero comics for sure. Miracle Man, thinking of the first trade title. That one pops to mind. But I do feel like this is kind of the archetype too. If you're doing a Superman character, this is the crux, right? That ability to fly is the thing that, above all else, elevates that experience.
Do we got the colorist, Steve Buccellato, doing all the heavy lifting on those clouds, man?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I was even wondering, like, because you can see some moire patterns in this, and I wondered if that was something from the original, because this is a reprint, and I wonder if that's something that, if things are adjusted 20 years later whenever this is reprinted, or if that's how the original was, and I just don't have a copy to reference it, but commenters can kind of leave something below the video in terms of that. So the other part of the creative team is Brent Anderson.
Yeah.
And Brent Anderson, I really liked his art back in the day. I liked it on this read, and I was trying to think about, like, why do I like it? How do I describe it for the sake of this video? And I was thinking of, like, a more functional storytelling based Neil Adams. It's a little bit, it's not as dynamic as Neil Adams, but in some ways the storytelling is very crisp. Yeah. And very easy to follow.
Heck of a figure drawer.
And very natural compared to, again, the image stuff that I have been moving away from originally at this time in my life. In the mid 90s, it was like, all right, I've seen enough of that kind of hyper stylized inking and rendering. Although there's a lot of rendering here, but it just is a little bit more of maybe an 80s style.
It almost feels like this stuff here, you don't see it throughout the rest of the book at all, but like very much right here explicitly is that Jim Lee kind of style. And I almost wonder if that's a little bit of a comic, some inside baseball stuff going on there for formal play.
Possible. And we wake up by the alarm clock, a familiar trope, except it's not the alarm that's going off. It's some kind of warning of, disasters out in the world that he's being alerted to, and he being Samaritan, the Superman-esque main character for this first issue. So you see him waking up at 4:33 in the morning because he's got work to do. Familiar tropes, costume hanging behind a painting that he slides to reveal, almost something like the closet in Watchmen. Everybody, superheroes have to have their hidden fortress era, or hidden fortress like spot, right? This is his bat cave. This is his comedian's closet, and he's off to work, man.
There were those. You get little snippets sometimes from the presidents of the United States in regards to like how their day is split up, and it is so lean, the amount of time that they have for meetings and to do like little appearances and things like that. I mean, it could be 14 minutes for this kind of thing, and you get glimmers of that here, where if he spends a half a second too long doing something, that could mean 5 deaths
right
somewhere else. So it's taking that sort of idea to the extreme, and I've never seen in up to this point 40, 45, 50 years of Superman's existence, never treated Superman comics were never treated in that sort of way. That idea was never explored. But Kurt Busiek is a student of the Silver Age. He's very much attuned to those comics. So he's able to... It's very interesting because he's an American guy. Like very often it's like the Alan Moores who come far removed from the culture that can like put that little extra spin on it. And I think he did some amazing stuff here because he's not trying to be Alan Moore or any of those guys. Like he's letting this be a superhero comic, but just there's more thought put into it than you get with your jobber titles.
Yeah, and you see this is his secret identity, also working at a newspaper. Again, the Clark Kent Superman archetype clearly on display here.
Yeah, Jimmy Olsen's.
But to your point of the story, the time subtext, it is that grim and gritty and realistic treatment, but the story doesn't feel grim and gritty, even though it's like... And I think the time, quite honestly, is something that I respond to now in a way I didn't respond to in 95. Like, I read this and it's like, I've got deadlines. I've got a list of things. I'm trying to do, 28 hours worth of stuff in a day. It felt very relevant, very easy to understand this, except that it's put through the lens of superhero.
Right. So he does, like, he is like a copy editor. So he's like low on the rung. He's not even, investigative journalist or anything. So in between doing his gig, like as he's copy editing stuff, he sort of programs this. It's not so well fleshed out exactly what the powers of this thing exactly are, but it's doing the copy editing for him while he's on to more pressing matters. And all throughout this comic, Busiek is sowing seeds. Man, he's planting some stuff like the villains and the other superheroes that he could then flesh out and explore later, which is a trope of a series. You want to build some of that in there so that you have something to lean on when it's time to go to issue number 2.
And also something for the fans to be like, I want to see more of this character or that character. They look cool, you know. It's there's a lot here as a first issue in that regard.
Yeah,
throwing those plates up in the air, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say the only thing that feels like it's missing when you compare this to, great episodic dramas or, stuff of that nature, or even just a great comic series, read any issue 1 of Stan and Jack's. There's not a story engine here. There's no grand thing that, like, everything gets wrapped up and tied up in a bun. So you could read it as a singular thing, but it would be nice to have something to kind of propel to move forward. I do think that it's good enough, a comic, that you just grab issue 2 anyhow.
Yeah, I wonder if there are things like some of these, Dr. Saturday, this biolab problem, if these are things that pop up in subsequent issues.
I mean, I'm sure
if
it is
something that's laid out in that way.
Yeah.
Not an obvious story engine, but maybe pieces that would connect. And you know what? I lingered here just to point out, he has this device that's almost like an AI engine, that's going to do his copy editing and stuff for him. And even which errors will go uncaught. And I love this because, like, whenever I was doing kind of faux old coloring or some of those effects in past comics, you want to have those errors. You want to make the art, it's the imperfections that sell the lie, so to speak. And it's like, that's a great detail for a writer to put in there. It'd be easy to skip that one, but it gives it some texture, some reality.
It's when you cheat on your test, right? Like, you got to build in a couple bad ones, or else the gig is up. And he even recalls that later on, where he's like, maybe I should program in some more errors. No, that would be unfair. Like, I need to do the job properly.
So there's a meeting, similar to like a Justice League kind of group called the Honor Guard. They meet in their flying ship fortress type thing. Again, easy to imagine many of these characters probably in future issues making appearances and maybe becoming supporting characters as we continue on in the series.
Yeah, I remember seeing Alex Ross paintings of this character right there, very regal.
And interrupting a robbery with characters in animal masks.
I feel like these are taken straight from Batman comics. Like, I've seen that trio.
It reminded me of, like, what's the second Batman movie, where, like, the Joker and they have a robbery in the beginning for some reason. This called that to mind, but I think having the masks, like, I have a Silver Age comic of that sort where the gangsters would wear those masks on top of regular suits, and it feels like an old comics trope. I mean, anything with masks is going to fit in perfectly with a superhero story. Coming and going, between his superhero identity and then his daily practices and what he's supposed to get done in here.
Yeah, so you see, like, he pops in one window, opens the locked door, already has all the work done. So, he's a tough employee to be around. They're like, no locked doors. He says, I work better in solitude. So he's a good employee, but he's also annoying to the people. And I guess he's single, so he gets to look through all the most beautiful ladies of Astro City.
Single and lonely.
And kind of fantasizing about them.
Yeah, and it's one of the sacrifices that he's made in this role as superhero is he just doesn't have a personal life at all, which again is something that I think of as an older person who works. This makes a lot more sense to me than it did whenever in 1995 I'm starting college. All I'm surrounded by are my peers. It's a very different world for me reading this 20 years ago than it is now. And again, you see him in a kind of a just montage of various daily activities of saving all sorts of things. I think that the team does a good job with that. Just showing a variety of stuff, raising sunken boats, almost like a historical renovations, saving collapsing buildings, and even acknowledges that he doesn't save everybody. People die even while I'm saving lives here, but I can still do what I can. That's another one of those sort of great observational notes to me is like, this is a guy who's saving hundreds of lives maybe in a day, can't save everybody.
Right. Yeah, that roots it.
Yeah, it's really great in a way.
Yeah, all this inner monologue you never get with Superman.
That's what I was going to say too. That acknowledgement of like, saved a bunch of lives but couldn't save them all. It would be true with Superman, but it's never, I don't know that I've ever read that in a Superman comic.
Exactly.
Accepts an award from the local fire department and makes a mention of how like he didn't do this for a long time and it started to breed resentment.
Right.
And so like there is value here, even though it'd be interesting. Run that tally of lives saved because like it would be going up of lives being lost while he's accepting this award, but it's PR.
Yeah, totally, man. And it's Busiek solving Silver Age problems. Like you would see this sequence in a Superman comic or somewhere where he's getting, the key to the city or something, but it's handled in such a smart way. Like Busick he's a smarty pants.
Yeah, you can really almost reverse engineer how you write a story like this, because it feels like you're brainstorming all these different ideas about, well, what would a Superman, what would a day be like, and coming up with all this stuff and then pulling in the parts that fit your story and work the best. And there's a lot of they cover a lot of ground in this issue.
And this feels honest to me, like if it makes a lot of sense, but I don't think that that's in the front of your thoughts when you're constructing the story. I think that some of the other stuff you could arrive at much easier than this sequence right here, trying to you look at an image of a Superman comic where he gets the key to the city, and then like trying to figure out like why would he do that, and come up with something good enough that makes sense in the way that this does. I think you can't do any better.
And he has his secret fortress of solitude here that kind of goes through a dimensional portal or something.
Yeah, it's Bret Hart's game room.
That's amazing.
Right,
yeah.
right. He's marking out for himself.
Fantastic. And while he's there, he gets attacked by Doomsday. Doesn't that character sort of resemble that design a little bit? This character is the living nightmare. I kind of like the concept. Possibly why I like that concept is we don't spend pages or issues establishing this concept. We sum it up very quickly, concisely, and it's easy to understand. It's basically this psychologically powered character that escaped from somewhere or other, but now feeds on that idea. Your worst fears, your nightmares, your depression, whatever emotional state you're in, probably facilitates that emotional state going negative, but then also feeds on that negativity. And so you get your classic superhero fight scene, right? Or Superman's got to have some kind of villain that he's going to face in an issue, or we would feel ripped off like nothing happened.
Yeah, still a superhero comic. And he is dispatched, not unlike the Sentinels in the classic Neil Adams X-Men run, where you just toss them up into outer space, and it totally works. But you can't just be doing this all the time.
For sure.
in a comic like this, we could give you one, but you got to come up with other ways just to keep the interests up.
Very efficient storytelling too. I think it's about 3 pages with that nightmare character. 4 pages, I guess. So 4 pages to establish the character, have the relatively quick fight, even though it feels kind of big and epic and Samaritan struggles with it, but keep going. In the interest of, hey, we're doing a one and done story here, you don't get to spend that much time with your superhero fight, and I don't know that we needed it. I did not read this comic and think I wish I had another couple of pages of nightmare.
Yeah, not at all, man. I mean, I was super happy to read this, and I'm certainly interested in checking out more. Absolutely.
I wasn't sure what this referred to. So it's past 1 a.m. by the time I get back to my apartment. I tally up the day, 56 seconds, best day since March. And I wonder if that's this travel time, because he often will say like 1.2 seconds to get to the Philippines, 7 seconds to get here or there. And I wonder if that's what that means. And it's just a mark of efficiency. Like, I did all of my do-gooding and I only spent 56 seconds on travel time.
Right.
So I don't know if that's what it is or not. It's kind of, that's one piece that I wasn't completely sure of. And now he's back to his dreams of flying, and that's the end. One day in the life of our Superman-esque character, Samaritan, and pretty good establishment. One of the things that we often say when we look at these first issues or look at one issue in a series, I'm eager to read more issues.
Yeah.
I'm very curious, like, okay, that worked well. Let's see what else you do, because I don't want to repeat. So, it's kind of been going Astro City on and off for a couple decades now, and I'm curious to see, like, what else did he do? What other directions did he push? Because it does feel like within the constraints laid out in issue 1, there's a lot of room to play with this. And it was a lot of areas that I can imagine a lot of one-shot issues. Nobody else was making those kinds of comics at the time. Certainly not at a high level.
Right. Yeah. And I look forward to reading a comic where the character, it might be like the Batman-esque character. Yeah. And then we've established, I don't even know who the Batman-esque character would be, just assuming. And we've established the Samaritan issue 1. So like to see him play a background role and to have a character maybe have some disdain for him, or there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I think you can tell stories from your villain standpoint. You can tell stories. I mean, Busiak
from a victim, like
Yes, I was gonna say.
one of those people that passed. That was my sister, motherfucker. I hate Samaritan.
Exactly. Busiak, one of his big claims to fame is Marvels, and the whole idea there is superhero comics told from non-superhero point of view. So lots of directions you could go in Astro City, and like I said, I will be reading more of these. I have a few more in my collection, and I do see them in dollar bins. So yeah, curious to check it out. And I think he released a new series last year that was Astro City. So still active and playing in that universe. And that's another one that I think indie and self-published and creator-owned superheroes struggle with, is they don't have that machine behind them to keep the character going on its own, or whenever a writer burns out or does something else. Kurt Busiek's stuck around, so you get some of that history and that development over a couple of decades.
For sure, man. You gonna go, Jimmy?
Yep.
Yeah, this just came yesterday. Show the people.
Raw, Weirdo, and Beyond. This is like a catalog, essentially, from an art show. I think it was in Boston. But it's all like 80s and 90s alternative comics. It reminded me a little bit of that Carnegie Mellon show.
Right.
I wish they had a catalog like this. They could have learned from these people.
Right.
Let's see if this fits. Oh, I'm going to put something in here too, so that we just get to the artwork.
Yeah, a lot of looky-loos this week because of our tight schedule. But we'll be back on things, next Thursday. Spending our extra weekend or whatever, a little extra time. Cosmic Odyssey is going to be one of the books that we're reading over the course of this week.
Got it loaded up for plain reading.
Yeah. I'm actually going to load it up digitally myself because I got a real tight spine on my trade, and doing the treadmill.
Yeah.
Like I can't keep one hand up, so I'm gonna digi up mine. Good.
Yeah.
Get out of this. All right, we should be good.
Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
And it is Kayfabe-tober. This is the list of prompts that we have designed this year. Been enjoying seeing everybody's drawings that they're posting on social media. If you guys are doing Kayfabe-tober or you want to join Kayfabe-tober now, be sure and tag us in your post so that we can enjoy your artwork, as well as other people that are participating in Kayfabe-tober that can find our talented audience. I also want to remind everybody that we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. There are 3 different levels there that will get you access to our videos early. And at the King Kayfaber level, you will get access to all of our videos first, because you will be sitting in on the recording session right now. Hello, King Kayfabers. And it'll give you a chance to get the books that we cover before they disappear from the aftermarket or go up in price. And we have had that happen during recording sessions. So check that out, see what level works best for you. And finally, we are a daily YouTube comic book channel. That means we have about 1,500 videos in our back catalog. You can search those on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Just go into that little search bar with the magnifying glass and put in your favorite title or favorite creator, and I bet you we'll have something that you'll enjoy there. All right, today's video, we are looking at a pretty cool art book, Raw, Weirdo, and Beyond. This is a catalog from a show that was at Boston College, and you can see right in the subtitle, this is a lot of alternative art from 1980 to 2000. So kind of stuff that we would grow up with, but also post-underground. You know, this is the stuff that you'd see Fantagraphics and D&Q and, again, alternative comics being featured here. And it's a huge show. It's a very nice catalog. There's a lot of intro material giving context to this work, interviews with various people like Francois Mollet from Raw Magazine. We're not going to focus on that one in this video. We're just going to kind of take a look at the artwork, but it's done in that artist edition style, which is to say 4-color scans and reproduction of this art in 4-color, even though a lot of it appears black and white. These are actually very nice
Yeah, it's great. You see
reproductions.
You see the nuance here. Like, not sure if the camera's able to pick it up, but you could see that Ho Che Anderson was drawing a face in there.
Yeah, it's always excellent to see this kind of process work. You know, here's a cover from King, and you can see he's working on a bigger piece of paper. We've got notes all over the margin, and I always love seeing like the marks on the sides where you're maybe tipping your brush or just testing out a color before you go into the actual art.
That super early looking Pete Bag. A lot more fuss and noodling than he grew into. Became a real brush slanger.
Yeah, 1986 Pete Bag. And they are arranged by alphabetical order by artist last name. Sometimes maybe 1 or 2 pages, sometimes a little bit more like we're getting with Pete Bag here. And also often covering a wide variety of what they're doing.
You see how his work grows, becomes way slicker. And this stuff was huge. This is that like or yeah story that DC Comics. It was a Vertigo comic bringing in Pete Bag and Gilbert Hernandez. Shouts to Joey Cavalieri, the editor over there, to like get actual good cartoonists in paid when comics were at such a bad kind of time. And Pete Bag would be there for a little while. He would do Sweatshop, which is a fantastic comic about comics.
Yes, and Gilbert Hernandez, same thing, does Sloth, the graphic novel over there, and I think maybe 1 or 2 other things. Teamed up with Darwin Cook on I think Darwin Cook's last work.
Shelley Bond was his editor on a number of things over there.
Yeah, so it's so funny to see these alternative creators, and then that page being from DC Comics.
Right.
Kyle Baker, Why I Hate Saturn. Owlspace. I don't remember this, but I like Kyle Baker's work, and one of the things that I like is the way he handled lettering for this stuff. You know, it was almost a different format, and so you get a couple of good samples of that, and you can see the lettering's actually pasted up here, kind of different. You know, for 1990, very different for what a typical comic book page looked like.
Absolutely.
And I love that cartoonists were pushing that. You know, they wanted to be different. I feel like now there's a lot of pressure to be the same as opposed to like, let's try something different. Let's try a new way to handle typography. Linda Berry, an alt weekly cartoonist, is where you'd see a lot of her work. These are pretty fascinating. 8.5 by 11 inches. So like 1 panel per page, but you know, these bigger images on a page. Kind of cool to see any, what I consider atypical working methods, and I think this is a little bit out there. Love the way the lettering is a huge, almost part of the illustration, as opposed to like, oh, a word balloon that's separate and maybe we'll have a separate letter or handle it. It's like half of the page and worked into, you know, different lettering styles and all over the composition.
Yeah, this is Ernie Pook's Comique, which was her weekly title, and these are pretty early, from 1981. Everybody who is sort of deep into the alt game, everybody knows about Harvey P. Clark going on Letterman and stuff. She was on Letterman. You could find that stuff on YouTube and it was like, you know, the cool Letterman, the NBC Letterman. She would be going on that, so she was very hip and had a giant readership.
Yeah, you mentioned that being pretty early. Here are examples from 7 years later and then almost 20 years later to kind of show her development too. Love seeing whenever you get color on the pages like this. This is watercolor in this case.
Looking at her, testing out her palette and stuff.
And also a very neat test. Whenever I think of Linda Berry work, I think of like no rules and just kind of chaotic on the page. Very organized, testing out those colors.
Yeah. She if you ever see her speak, man, she makes a good argument for Family Circus is not a bad comic.
Alison Bechtel, Dykes to Watch Out For, being an alt comic strip, but also very known for Fun Home, selling massive amounts. One of the breakthrough
Broadway
hits of graphic novels. I was surprised to see her lettering, which I thought was digital lettering, but then you see a lot of the lettering right on the board directly, just very tight, very organized, and also like the second color being added, something that, I don't know, nice to see on the original boards.
Yeah, you got to have some confidence to do that. And I don't know that you get to white out your inking if that's an option to you to color on the boards. So.
There is an acetate overlay, so I wonder what part is going on there, if that's your lettering or if that is like a printout.
Yeah, I bet it's the black line.
Mark Beyer is an artist. I guess we've seen him in Raw magazine, a couple of the issues maybe that we covered. Did he show up yet? Maybe. I'm trying to think of when he shows up. It's possible that we see him in future Raw issues, so not on the channel yet, but stuff we've looked at. I like his work a lot, and it's pretty cool to see some samples of his pages, and part of what I like, totally unique visual stylist. does stuff with textures and with weird perspectives and character designs. He's bringing a lot to these to comics that I don't know what he's drawing from.
No.
You know, I assume it's a lot of outside comics influences.
And it does have a folk art sensibility to it. It's a little bit non sequitur with the interactions of the characters, but like he really captured public imagination on Liquid Television. They adapted several of his works to make like tiny shorts and things. But I mean, doesn't this feel like just outside of comics? It feels like outside of the art game.
Yeah.
It's representative. So obviously that's a strike against him.
Especially at the early, like 1979 was that first page, and that was a time whenever art schools are teaching abstract expressionism still. So figurative art, definitely something. He was just a guy outside of whatever system, as you say, Ed. I think that's a good observation. I would also make note for people watching at home, notice the collections of. So Glenn Bray is somebody that we see many of these pages pop up from. Charles Burns. I could look at Charles Burns art all the time.
I just seen something pop up on Amazon. It's called something Komeek or something, coming from Fantagraphics. Charles Burns book in summer 2024.
Can't wait. But I love whenever he does these like book, almost like paperback covers, and even draws like the stylized side of the book.
He got good fast. When you look at his earliest stuff, take a look at our Raw 3 episode. Like, it has some early Charles Burns. He's still using the brush. It's a thinner line. It's a little less sure of itself, but I mean, those are early. That's the 80s. It's 2-3 years after the stuff that we looked at.
Yeah, it doesn't take him long to have that style very worked out. Dan Clow's cover and page from Blab. I was looking at this and really thinking about Clow's and how his work pops. And he does these close-ups and faces. I don't know if he gets credit for everything he does well. Like this feels like just classic cartoon illustration, but just done so effectively.
It's so funny because we know what's behind there. There's a big fish.
Couple more Clow's pages. This is an interesting one. This is working over Jack Bilbo. I think he had a book of drawings or something, and Clow's like did paintings of a couple of those drawings. But if you look at in the studio book, I believe they'll show you like the original drawing and then the painting that Clow's made from that. And it's weird images, as this painting certainly suggests.
I mean, I think that the original image like is this whole piece, and then Clow's just gouached it up.
Suko, another artist that we'll see as we continue going through Raw Magazine. Interesting, these artists who kind of dip in and out of comics over time. Suko, not a big body of work in comics, but they're in the 80s.
Totally. She's
this is 91, so
she's connected with the Raw people, and then she got her own Raw one-shot. She was in the documentary Comic Book Confidential.
Yeah. You also see that this is from the Billy Ireland collection.
This one definitely is. It better say Billy. Yeah, because dude, the amount of times that we took this out and sat with it, it's a 10-pager. Fucking man, spent a lot of time with these originals.
Yeah, amazing.
Sorry to cut you off. I just got excited seeing that.
No, I'm just saying, like, some of this stuff you could go and see in person.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, totally. Yeah, we spent a lot of time. Oh my god, remember when you came out, dude? Like, this is definitely something that we pulled.
Nice big pages too, 17 by 14. So it's a nice art book in that this is how you often see art treated in like an art book, where you're getting dimensions and dates and collections of all this other information. I think is very valuable. I used to have the Introducing Kafka. There was like a series of little paperbacks.
Yeah.
And that one had a bunch of Crumb illustrations throughout, which was kind of neat.
Yeah.
One of my early Crumb things that I bought. Found it in a bookstore.
Very ominous cover, I remember. With like a little watercolor. There's that gaze of Kafka out at the reader.
Yes. Dame Darcy pages from Meat Cake. I enjoyed looking at these. I have not read any real amount of Meat Cake. I have a couple of random issues I've gotten here and there, but like looking at the art, I'm so impressed by it.
She's one of those Seattle cats. She was on an episode of like Blind Date or something years ago. And she, is still out there whenever I would be out in Seattle. She is not playing. Like, she had boyfriends that had like collars, and she had like a leash, and she's like bringing them on by and stuff like that. So like, Dame Darcy has a kayfabe name and stuff, and she like lives the gimmick.
I like her art a lot though, like the character designs. It's pretty sharp. Nice line art. Kim Deitch, big Kim Deitch fan. We'll have to figure out some Deitch to look at on the channel. Good as comics and has several graphic novel and collections, so there shouldn't be any shortage of finding good Deitch. But one of the things they do that's great, he's known for his rigorous working method of working up sort of drafts almost, and you get to see like a finished page versus one of those preliminary sketches. Meanwhile, blow up those levels and you could probably publish that.
Yeah, I discovered him in the pages of comics by Les Daniels, and a very striking way of drawing faces and like unmistakable. You see it, it's like, okay, that's Kim Deitch, and he's probably one of the first artists that I recognized style wise, because he had stuff when I was in elementary school. If it wasn't Highlights magazine, Nickelodeon had a magazine. Mm-hmm. It was a kid centric magazine, and I saw these Kim Deitch pieces, and I'm like, that has to be the person from Comics by Les Daniels. And I saw him draw dicks and buttholes, and it's in this like little kid magazine.
Yeah, really interesting artist too. Like very interested in pop culture, so you get a lot of that, like early television stuff and pop culture history. Great lettering, great everything. Yeah. By the way, this piece 8.5 by 11, and you can see there's even big margins, so that's a really small drawing for. Take a close look, everyone. A lot of detail in there for a relatively small piece.
Holy crap.
Julie Doucet, when I started reading alternative comics, she was one of the first people I found in Dirty Plot, published by D&Q. Really like her work, and we were looking at Eileen Kaminsky Crumb recently, and I saw some parallels, in terms of maybe textures and really filling up a panel with these different marks. That was something that I responded to with her work, is just like creating all sorts of value and texture just with ink.
Yeah, you did a Kayfabe Street Angel piece that was Doucet related, right? Yeah. On the slave labor.
Yep. Yeah, big fan of hers, like I say, and I don't know. Hopefully that's evident why. Mary Fleener has some of that kind of energy too, bringing in patterns, great black and white. A lot to like in these comics.
She was interviewed in like the Ape episode of Anti-Gravity Room, so that put her on my radar. And when the lottery winner comic book guys, they have that guilt, and then they want to bring their homies along and stuff. So like when Bongo Comics by Matt Groening, like he had that little imprint called Zongo.
Yeah.
And he did some Gary Panther stuff, and then he did Fleener comics.
Yep.
Like that was the earliest stuff I got, and then Sletberger. I was filling in my collection and would scoop up.
Cell vinyl paint on acetate for the coloring on these, which is pretty interesting to think about. Like, how are people making color comics back in the day? However they could figure out whatever materials they had. Phoebe Glockner, this was another one of the early alternative cartoonists I found from a book called Dangerous Drawings. It had like maybe 15 interviews of different cartoonists, and she was one of them, and I just would go like, I gotta find everybody from this book.
Totally. It's so funny you say that, man, because I never saw that book, but there was a book called Mind Riot that has a Peter Cooper cover. It was the only other comic-centric book in the Homestead Library adjacent to Comics by Les Daniels. It had a peat bag or intro or something. Carol Swain's in there. There's a lot of cartoonists that whose names escape me and I don't think went on to much. Carol Swain was in there, so it's like now I got to grab all Carol Swain stuff. And Phoebe Glockner shows up, and she is probably one of my favorite cartoonists of the 80s. Didn't do so much. Trained medical illustrator.
Yeah, right. And you see it in sort of the precision of her art.
Yeah. The gravity and the squash and stretch of the body masses and things. Diary of a Teenage Girl is has transcended the comics medium. Received a feature film, and that's probably the work that's like most heavily in reprint or in print. But she had a couple collections that were coming out back in the day.
It's beautiful work. Great integration of your lettering. Again, patterns, grayscale, kind of a master of black and white.
Absolutely, one of my favorites.
One of the other nice features of this book is because they cite where they come from, you see a lot of the range of what was being published. Where might an alternative cartoonist find a little bit of pay and a little bit of exposure? In that case, Weirdo magazine.
Yeah, in 1993, which is like hard for me to believe. When I'm in comics, that Weirdo's still coming out. I thought it was like well done.
Matt Groening, Life in Hell, 1986. So before Simpsons, Matt Groening, an accomplished alt weekly cartoonist. This is color separation. So you got to represent Hernandez brothers if you're going to do alternative comics of the 80s and 90s. But in this case, pulling out like some production art to show off, which is kind of neat. If you see John Workman at a comic book show that you go to, check out his stuff. He always brings a bunch of that production material. Gilbert Hernandez, the first of the Hernandez that we're going to look at here. Kind of an ominous panel there. Probably chosen as part of this exhibit because of its power that came to it way after it was drawn in 1988.
What a cartoonist.
Really shows off his ability, the depth, having like your flat wall behind our foreground characters, and great black and white throughout.
Fantastic textures. I'd like to see a little paste up. That's interesting.
It is, yeah.
A lot of Gilbert represented.
Yeah, really great contrast too to see like this degree of lettering and kind of a different narrative approach compared to a typical comic book page.
There will be a day where we get all 50 issues of that OG 11 Rockets recorded and uploaded onto the channel.
For sure.
There goes issue number 2, dude. What a comic.
It's nice too when you pull out one page as opposed to the whole comic and you get a chance to really survey that page. It's almost a way to see it differently.
Totally.
And man, looking at this page, everything we say good about Jaime, it's like, yeah, of course. Keep saying it. You are not wrong. And again, they do a nice job with representing maybe 10, 15, 20 years. These guys who have a long career, you get a chance to see them grow with a few of the pages that are sampled in this show. Makes me wonder why a show like this isn't like constantly going on.
Right.
Because it seems like there would be such an audience all the time. I think the audience just keeps growing for this kind of material. Ben Catcher, Jules Knipple real estate photographer, really like his work. And, these are ink washes. I think he now works all digital, which is pretty interesting because it still retains this quality. Love that his lettering is so unique. And this made my day because my first Ben Catcher was in the back of Metropolis magazine. These are a couple of pages. He would get one full-size color page. And they were, self-contained. You'd read them like anytime that issue. I had a subscription at work. So it would show up and I would go right to the back page instantly to read it. Look at the size on it. 33 by 24 inches. This is 2 by 3 feet. It was a little bit oversized, the magazine, but it probably had to be reduced at least 50%, maybe even greater reduction than that. But I love seeing this kind of stuff and his attention to architecture so unlikely. It's like a freehand drawing approach to something that I often think of as straight edges and cold. He brought a real warmth to that. Kaz, man, you turn the page and my first impression is Chris Ware, and then you go, oh wait, no, that's not right. Kaz, another artist that we've seen in Raw magazine, I think might have been a student of Art Spiegelman whenever he starts doing some work for Raw in 1980.
Yeah, it comes out of the School of Visual Arts right alongside Drew Friedman and my lettering teacher Phil Felix. Man, had some Kaz stories.
Yeah, I bet that's an interesting collection of names you just put out there, Ed. He's a cartoonist, and I say this with in some of the various past stuff we look at. His language is all comics and cartoon language, and I really respond to that.
Right, yeah, that was another guy that he went to school with, Mark Newgarden,
yes,
has that same energy as well. So maybe you put two poles together and a crazy reaction happens. Maybe they fed each other.
It makes sense to me.
Or maybe that was the zeitgeist. Maybe that's the influence of Art Spiegelman.
I was going to say, you add Art Spiegelman to the front of the class there, and you can imagine a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah.
Keith Knight, a cartoonist who's had success in a variety of media, and somebody that we would see at SPX and at some of the small press shows. An alt weekly guy, but also much more than that.
Totally, and really was keeping that going. One of the last who was able to kind of keep making that the K Chronicles work. Great lettering, man. Like just fantastic cartooning.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like the lettering is awesome, but also the cartoon language. Like all of these characters, the faces, the expressions, and the simplification of that. Almost building his own language there, from a visual standpoint.
Funny as hell too.
Eileen Kaminsky-Crum, mentioned her a minute ago. We've looked at some of her work on previous videos, and here get a very different feeling of it with painting. Her background is in fine arts, so sometimes that informs her comics, and sometimes the comics maybe inform some of her other ventures.
I'm trying to remember, man, but Christine Critter came up in conversation on the channel, and I don't remember where.
It might have...
Maybe Glenn Bray?
Yeah, it was some collection of work we were looking at. There's a lot of her work in here, and it also goes in a lot of different directions. Love this being the color separations, but I think it's so striking in this format. And it was some cartoonist I had not heard of a year ago, and then came across her in one of the videos that we were looking at, and pretty nice selection of her work here to kind of show like a lot of cartoonists and alt cartoonists, they do all kinds of art. It's funny to see this and think of again, Chris Ware, this idea of cartoonists that are doing sculptures and making toys and figures, a very different interpretation of that.
What's so funny,
but
Jimmy?
Still these brains that are just going in different directions.
We've been looking at 2D surfaces the entire time. Like I thought that was just painting or something.
Yeah, I mean, now you see 3D models, it would look exactly like that probably. Carol Lay, this is again Weirdo is one of the features for this art collection, but has done work all over the place. Had her own series at Fantagraphics for a while. This is fun too. You get to see the sketches, the layout preliminary sketch. They say that, but again,
Publishable.
exactly.
Totally publishable. It's just about your own personal values, and to her, like she just doesn't want to show that off. She's more comfortable.
And another example of this is also Carol Lay. This is a New Yorker piece, but you see it with mixed media on paper. So adept at black and white, but also the ability to do color.
Yeah, man, because you get 5 Gs for that in the New Yorker.
Tony Millionaire, another alt weekly guy, but also a guy who's done comic books and graphic novels and just all kinds of pen and ink drawings.
Francois doing things.
Yeah. This was mentioned in her interview earlier. They talk about this. They talk about Raw Magazine. They talk about her whole career. But this is like her one comic page.
Right.
Didn't do a lot of comics.
It's an issue 1
yes.
of Raw. We looked at that in greater fashion on that video. So in her production materials, that's
exactly.
fun.
Yeah, you get to see like ruby liths and color separations and stuff here. You can look up here and see the corresponding pieces of the different color films.
Look at that, man. I mean, that's an art.
Yeah, it's and gone at this point.
Yeah,
nobody's looking at film separations like this anymore.
Yeah, what is fun and what comic fans kind of get a kick out of, whenever I was doing Hip Hop Family Tree things and coloring underneath, and then taking the black line off, and I would sometimes show off the color layers, and it's not too dissimilar from what you're seeing right there.
Yeah, I often think that's a really neat effect. Like I'll turn off a line layer for whatever reason, checking something out underneath, and sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that's really cool looking.
Yeah.
Just the color shapes up there.
There's the Suco one-shot joint. Oh, it's a dummy.
Yes, it's a dummy, and then there's a raw dummy, and what's the comic art magazine has like an issue like this where they look at a bunch of the raw mock-ups and look at this. Like we saw Seth doing this where they're like building the books themselves, like this is the hardcover mock-up. I love that stuff. Right. That is something that you just don't see that much of. Very, very cool. Mark Newgarden, mentioned him a minute ago about being a guy who was into the cartoon language. This is a great strip that illustrates that.
He's a cool cat, man. He brought to SPX this one year, 2016, I believe. He brought like reels of cartoonist footage, like all the cartoonist footage that he could find from the 1900s, black and white footage and things, and it was about 2 hours long of reels, and it would be Kniff,
that's awesome,
in bed, getting served breakfast in bed, and like the guy who does Chick Young on the dock of his estate, about to go on his outboard motor and go fishing and stuff. Like, so it was like domestic. It was inside all of their studios. You got to see all the helmets from every army aligning the top of the bookshelves in Milt Kniff's studio, Prussian helmets and like all kinds of crazy shit.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was great. It was so fantastic, man. So riveting.
This Nancy strip, I feel like, is one of those great cartoon strips, because it kind of goes through and it's like, I forget what you look like. It's personal ad is like the comic, but it shows Nancy with all these different configurations of like eyes in different places, mouth and nose switch, stuff like that. Just very, very funny way to think about comics making.
And with Nancy in particular, like, it's perfect because like when I first saw this character, and I don't know where I would have first saw it. I think maybe there was cartoons. Like I don't know that it was comics, but like I thought it was a gremlin or like a little monster. But that's a girl called Nancy, built with those pieces. I could not wrap my mind around it as a kid. So, like, this speaks very, very closely to me.
This is kind of your concept, right? Newgarden playing in all these different directions. Very interesting cartoonist.
Yeah, super formal guy. He takes credit for being a creator of Garbage Pail Kids. Like, that's like the claim to fame. But beyond that, there's the little nun that the comics in McSweeney's. Mm-hmm. But there's not enough to even have a collection, I don't think.
We All Die Alone is his one kind of a collection, but it's this stuff. It's 1 page, 2 pages, almost concept stuff. You see, ID Magazine is the source for that. New York Press, the source for the previous page. So it also speaks to like there were outlets for this stuff. Gary Panter,
Del Tokyo, baby.
And it's funny seeing these things. That's, I don't know, 7.5 inches, and the original's 23. The Dao Tokyo book, I believe it was released the same day as Building Stories, I think. And I remember it getting somewhat, not the amount of attention it should get, because it's this great wide collection of Gary Panter art, just stunning stuff. And I feel like it just wasn't talked about as much as I want it to be. It's a fantastic collection, a really awesome book.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that book comes out earlier. I feel like I remember seeing it at the library.
It may be a different book that I'm confusing it with, but I remember it came out when there was a high-profile other alternative comic release. I got them both at Fana, but one was talked about a lot and one wasn't.
Yeah.
It has a prominent place on my shelves. Some Jimbo artwork. Did we look at Jimbo, or have we just talked about it?
And we should, like the corrugated cardboard cover one.
I don't have that one, but it's a lot of the interior is the same part. It was a comic that I got early, yeah. It was a piece I got early, and it just was like bizarre to me. You know, like I just puzzled over like this kind of artwork. You know, I had never seen comics that looked like this.
Totally.
Yeah, it really made an impression. Pee-wee's Playhouse, some reference to that. That always blew my mind too. That like knowing his artwork, like how could he do concept art for somebody can make a chair out of his drawings? And a nice selection of Gary Panter art in here.
Is that the Elvis joint? No, it's.
And an artist that has done all sorts of different stuff as well.
Yeah.
You know, some of these like oversized pieces. I think whenever he did the Inferno, Dante's Inferno style.
There's like 3 volumes of that.
He would do one panel a night.
Right.
And, you know, those books are magnificent, but it speaks to this artist that's like really even working in different methods from project to project.
Yeah, because that Dante's Inferno, it's about tabloid size and the amount of rigor. Like with everything we just saw, where you see that kind of schizophrenic mark making, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's Crumb tight.
Yes. How about Harvey Pekar and Crumb team ups here?
Look at Crumb, dude, using fucking spiral bound like sketchbook sketchpad paper.
Yeah, it's interesting whenever you see a bunch of the Crumb artwork, you'll see like all different sizes and everything. Like that guy's just working on whatever. Give him something to draw on.
Right. Some more Kim Deitch.
Yeah, this is kind of an oddity too. The Big Book of Thugs was published by DC Comics, and you know the fact that Kim Deitch, I didn't know that he did work for them, but it's so funny to think of him as getting a little paycheck from DC Comics in the 90s. Those big books are pretty interesting. At some point, maybe we'll do a video on some of this because I have a few of those. But they were those books that could be sold in bookstores and they could be sold to non-comics readers.
It's true. And
I wish there was more of that.
As we were getting started on our careers, like I just want to take a look at the year on that because I think it's probably pretty late. Yeah, like 96. Like I was sending submissions by then for sure. That was a viable foot in the door to be a part of Paradox Press and maybe get a page in one of the big books. Like that was an achievable first step for about 4 or 5 years there.
Yeah. Richard Sala, who another cartoonist at some point I'm sure we'll get a chance to look at, but very stylized, a cartoonist we lost recently, too young, you know, a very young cartoonist. You can see 59 to 2020, what is that, 61 I think, 61 years, but the unique style is what pops. I've never met Richard Sala, I don't know him personally, but a unique style, even the lettering unique. I do think a lot of this value is gone. This idea of like you want to do everything your way, like have a signature everything, your lettering, your you know, your font.
That was one of the tenets of the Bill Griffith like 40 tips. One of the tips that he had was like, don't try to letter like Artie Simek. You know, don't try to have Marvel DC lettering. Like come up with your own kind of style. You know, follow some rules. And I do think that Sala breaks some of the rules. Like it's sometimes it's not a clean read, which is what you risk when you play around with the forms. We talked with Dave Cooper, and his early like Aircel comics had like little curly cues and stuff. You know, he looks at that and is like, nah, that's too much.
Yeah, definitely that's the risk you run if you're pushing the envelope.
Speaking of Kafka, dude, this was in Raw #2, from the Juice Swart cover. You know, the Pantheon Raws, you know, Volume 2.
Right.
And how brilliant, right? How freaking brilliant, dude.
Yeah, fantastic. fantastic. And what I think of when I think of Sikoriak is this chameleon that does all sorts of styles and mashups, and a very, very interesting cartoonist. Fun guy. I like talking to him whenever I run into him at a show.
Yeah, we saw him at a CXC.
Another good example of that, Little Dory in Pictureland 2008. But you can see him just ability to really do almost anything. Some Art Spiegelman here. And we'll get a decent representation from him as well. Man, another cartoonist that was just a wide range. I forget what I was reading, but like he starts so young.
Totally. I was working with Jay Lynch, and they had connections before Underground Comics really started, through the pages of fandom, like from maybe Humbug or like during the Ditto days. Jay Lynch in Chicago was corresponding with little Art Spiegelman in New York, and I did strips where both of those guys worked together, like trying to recruit more people to their fanzines, dude. So this would be in the 50s.
You see, this is from the collection, Jay Lynch Papers and Collection of Original Art, part of the Billy Ireland collection. But you see, speaking to your Jay Lynch connection, probably had a big collection of Art Spiegelman work from a long relationship with the guy. Adrian Tomine doing Sleepwalk Optic Nerve #1.
Yeah, super early.
And even earlier, his mini comics collection.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'd like to get Seth on the record talking about seeing young Adrian Tomine artwork.
Yeah, for sure. Carol Tyler, great cartoonist, and another one of these cartoonists that's able to do black and white and color work.
Yeah,
she's always impressive to me.
Yeah, and she's got work that, like, as she continues to make comics, better and better.
Yeah, that's the other part that's very inspiring, is seeing these cartoonists that their best work is coming out 30, 40, 50 years into the game.
Yeah.
It's always makes me feel hopeful for myself. Some Chris Ware work, and 23 3/4 by 20. So we're looking at 2 feet there by over 1.5 feet.
Is that the Daily Texan piece?
Yes, 1989. Yeah. Very, very young Chris Ware. You see some of this stuff, like the cross-hatching will kind of go away, some of this more naturalistic drawing replaced by a more cartoonish style, but you see him working that out in these pages, and a rigorous cartoonist, like doing this level as a student.
Totally. And you also got to realize, like, it's place and time stuff, so like it's format, so it's black and white. He knows that, so he's going to add like some extra textures and things.
Yeah, you see those cross-hatching, but you also see the screen tones being put on there, like really a guy who's conscious of production from student days, probably from before that. I think his grandfather was connected to newspapers. So, very thoughtful in that way, just bringing all of that to bear.
I think he does credit the Daily Texan with being a place where he could figure out like color separations and like how to do more production.
This piece is bizarre to me because it says oil on canvas, and I just really don't know how you do this kind of lettering in oil.
Oh, I know, man. Is it just and it's not even big.
No, it's not big. So I don't know. Maybe the oil is thinned down quite a bit because those letters look pretty thin, almost like it's markered and then faded, if it were original art.
Right.
So I don't know if that's the secret or what, but again, a guy who's exploring everything, right? Like he's exploring comics in oil paint. Not something that most people who oil paint will tell you. Not the funnest way to work.
It's that first page of Jimmy Corrigan.
Yeah,
that's going to be one of those things, Jimmy, where like, it's sorely like not on the channel, but it's 400 pages. Like how do we do it?
Right. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Oh man, look at these things. This is another 2 by 3 feet. Look at the detail of like precision lettering going down the side of it.
And he'd do a couple of these things a week, man.
Yeah.
Just really, really devoted student of the forum.
Yeah, absolutely. Always great to see these kinds of, again, like this whole collection, like this would be the richest collection of artwork I would have seen up to about age 28 or something if this had been published earlier in my life. J.R. Williams doing a parody of Gary Panter and Jimbo.
Yeah, and
it's pretty spot on
and
in
raw
places.
Even with the masthead and stuff.
Yeah. I don't even know if this was published anywhere. It's not credited as being published anywhere, so I'm not sure what this is from.
We're getting some catharsis from J.R. Williams.
Working some stuff out. Jim Woodring, another cartoonist who does painting, and pretty amazing to see this, and it's actually marker.
Wow.
Yeah. How about that? I think of that, and then I look back at it, and it's like, wait, how's he blending all this stuff? Because, like, look at this thing looks like airbrush.
Oh, totally. Like, I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm thinking that maybe he uses a lot of, like, those French grays to begin, and you know, like, and then like we'll put like a wash of color over top.
I remember getting like my first collection of Jim Woodring Frank comics, and it was that big hardcover, and just being like lost for hours in that world. It's such a realized, from a style point of view, it's like that's, you've walked into Jim Woodring's head.
Yeah. Is that some airbrush?
Charcoal.
Mm.
Yeah, charcoal, which again kind of points out to an artist who's working in all this different media. So that's your art collection. It's about 150 pages of the artwork alone, in a very, very good reproductions. You get your artist bios, you know, kind of short biographies in the back.
It makes it all the more fascinating after going through the whole thing, because it's like, okay, we start with A. So Kyle Baker was real early, but he is so divorced from everybody else in this thing that I actually forgot that he was in there. But it's like, yeah, he was in there. And I do remember, like, you know, I don't know if it's ever come out so publicly, so I'm not going to name names, but a lot of like first gen alt comic guys, they were not so into the Kyle Baker stuff, that they perceived as he got page rate or something. You know, it was further along. He probably made more money than these dudes, and they were like upset.
Yes, yeah, it's interesting how that works for sure. His biography is fantastic. Just reading it here, like the amount of stuff that he's done. He's a guy who's done everything from animation, fine art, all this stuff. So really nice book. Like I said, I would have gone crazy for this in 2000, you know, if this had come out earlier. But you get it when you get it, and definitely a standout in terms of art collections and books. Artist edition style, man. You really get to see inside these cartoonists what their work and methods, and actually get to see those pages reproduced. Such a rich experience. If you're a maker, you can learn so much just going through this page by page.
Absolutely. And I had no idea that this book existed, man. So, you know, when you sent me a little photo of what we were going to be looking at, snapped it up immediately, and it was pretty affordable on the aftermarket. May not be now, though.
Yeah, so don't wait.
Good to go?
I am.
So, Jimmy, one of the things I wanted to look at was the Simonson Manhunter.
Uh-huh.
But we'll replace that. We'll do that later because it is Halloween time. So like we'll do that Eerie thing, and Stedman, yeah. And then the two that I'll do that Issey Sagawa joint. I'll look through it, and then we'll handle that deftly. And then the Conversations books, and we'll be good.
I think we may just kind of like skip, because this is 500
I'm gonna
pages.
follow your lead, man.
And my thinking with this, everybody at home, we're looking at Ralph Steadman, A Life in Ink. But my thinking there is let's try to do a manageable amount, and then who knows, maybe we come back to it.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious how
it's mostly chronological.
Yeah, but in like 2018, let me see. He did this thing for Bonnie Doon Vineyard, where he did these wine labels, and I worked with that vineyard as well. So it would be like,
I think those are in here.
It would be like it was pretty cool because it was cartooning. Because one would be like this Popeye arm with the anchor and stuff, a big fat one, and it's just grabbing grapes like this to make the wine.
That's
and the
good.
Grapes are screaming.
Was it him?
It was Ralph Steadman. Yeah, it was called Cardinal Zinn.
I don't remember that one being in here,
but
this is one that I've been going through at night, and you almost have to, like, I'll start at the back and work forward,
right?
You know, because it's a lot to
Walter
take
White.
in.
Okay, yeah, it's not in there. It was real wild working for that vineyard guy because he was such a hippie dude, and he wanted me to quote a price, and I considered the price pretty high, and he doubled it, and
That's always nice.
And was like, "Yeah, I'm a taskmaster."
Ooh.
And he was. So
well,
it was
good of him to know it and
it was
to bring
earned.
it up front.
Yeah.
And to pay.
Yeah, no, it was a pretty cool thing.
It's amazing whenever you work for somebody and they're like a good client.
Yeah.
Even if they're demanding, you
Sure.
know, like you can be a good client and be demanding.
The thing is, like, what happened, like all the changes he wanted were like really easier on me. It was less drawing. He was providing photographs for me to incorporate into the thing. So it's like, well, okay, well, I don't get to draw that. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Good to go.
Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
And we are still in Kayfabe-tober. This is the list of the prompts for 2023. Been seeing some very beautiful drawings from our talented audience already. If you guys are participating in Kayfabe-tober, or if you haven't yet and you want to jump in, by all means, any day is a good day to start. But be sure and tag us so that we can see your drawings and so everybody else can find your drawings as well. We do have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon with 3 levels of participation. You can get our videos early, and at the King Kayfaber level, you get all of our videos first because you actually sit in on the recording session, and when you see a book that you want to add to your collection, you'll be the first one to scoop it up that way, get ahead of the Kayfabe effect, which means rare books disappear or they go up in price quickly. So check out the Patreon, see which level works best for you. And finally, we are a daily Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, which means we have about 1,500 videos in our back catalog, and you can search those on the Cartoonist Kayfabe homepage on YouTube. There's a little bar with a magnifying glass. Put in your favorite comic book or your favorite cartoonist and see if we have a video for you. Chances are we do, or we have one adjacent. So check that out and check out the back catalog. And when you find a video you love, be sure and share that. It is the way we grow this channel and we get new viewers and subscribers. All right, Ed, today we are looking at Ralph Steadman, A Life in Ink. This is an amazing book. I just picked it up and it's been living on my nightstand for like a month going through this thing. Steadman, one of the great drawers and one of the great drawers in ink. You'll see as we go through a lot of cartooning, even on the cover. A little bit of photo put in there, but then these marks of just pure cartooning line. Very chaotic line, a line that we don't often see in the more polished world of American comic books. And I love this line.
It's so unique to him. You just see this and you think Steadman.
Yes.
And how often does that happen in a person's career?
Yes. He's a guy who incorporates a lot of this kind of, the materials themselves, you know, with the splatters and the drips and probably the ink nibs getting stuck on the page and then splattering out. And if you get into his process, which the beginning of this book does have a little bit of background on how he works, that kind of chance is something that he brings to the studio, you know, working on these blank pages every day and really getting comfortable going from blank page to having ink washes and dumps and drips and all of these happy accidents that he then incorporates into his work. Pretty fantastic. And we'll kind of go through this, maybe skip around a bit as we go along. You see Hunter S. Thompson, I think, easily identified here. Somebody that Steadman collaborated with extensively throughout Hunter's life, and I think the two are very closely associated.
Off camera, we were talking. I was trying to see if some of his work for the Bonnie Doon Vineyard was in this book, and it's not. But I went to work with that vineyard as well, and when we brought up the Steadman part in the comic that I did for that, like I had to do my version of that.
You know what? I stand corrected. Self-portrait.
Yeah.
I see a bald guy, and I think Hunter S. Thompson, because the pictures here are a little bit younger of Steadman in these photos. You know, you don't quite see that look, but his studio sounds amazing. And again, this extra text material really fills in some of those gaps. But we're just going to jump right in and start looking at some of this artwork.
Is this a Taschen book?
I don't know who publishes this book. I don't believe it's Tash Chronicle.
Okay.
But 1960 on this date. This is mostly arranged chronologically, so you know we're looking at 60 years of artwork here.
Yeah, he's fantastic. You could very, very cogent speaker. You could find some good interviews with him around and shit. If he's still around, Ralph, let's get the shoot interview.
Yeah, I would love to because it's such an adventurous artist. And again, I mentioned kind of moving about. This is 1954. These pieces.
This is my favorite stuff of like. When you go visit the Warhol Museum downtown, and you start at the top floor, and it's the earliest part of Warhol's career, you get to see where the illustration game was and how kind of sophisticated illustration was at this exact time. You know, they were contemporaries in magazine illustration.
Yeah, that's fantastic to put it in context. Absolutely. But you see the adventure, how adventurous he is, like bringing in collage elements and mixing materials all over.
Yeah, you see stuff like that. And because we are Cartoonist Kayfabe, you got to say Sienkiewicz.
Yes.
You know, it's like pulling a lot from Steadman, and we're going to see that bag of tricks here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned his line being this like courageous, bold, almost abstract line at times. The only guy I can think of that really does that is Sienkiewicz in terms of in comics, in a Marvel DC comic book artist way. But I love this stuff too. You know, thinking about cartooning with Ralph Steadman, like he's using that language. You know, literally that's a word balloon.
Yeah, absolutely. The ink pens that he will use, you know, just like those Warhol illustrations, it will be like it's the wrong nibs for like what we're supposed to be using them for. It would be those like C nibs with the flat
the lettering nibs, and you'll see those marks.
Yeah, often you see it like here where it's a thin line where you're almost dragging that lettering nib across calligraphy pen. And then whenever you pull it down, you get the wide part, the chisel tip coming into effect. And, you know, there have been cartoonists that work on that. Jim Mahfood uses some of those chisel tips. It's a pretty fun instrument to draw from. If you've never tried it at home and you're into drawing, I would say grab a couple of those calligraphy pens and play with them because they are very fun to draw with. A lot of color, too. His ability to go back and forth between color and black and white stands out to me. But I think he's just a master at graphic art.
Absolutely.
A lot of these straight lines, too, are worked in. And I think that creates the contrast between that kind of like lively, like I'm dragging this pen nib against the grain across paper. But then you have these controlled, very straight lines as a contrast to that. And I think it probably makes it pop even further whenever he's getting very organic and allowing chance to enter the compositions.
Yeah, I was so thrilled to be looking at this.
I was looking at this, I've been looking at it for about a month, and Al Hirschfeld is another cartoonist I think of that has that, like, a great line.
Yeah.
And I've seen video of him, and I swear he pushes the pen nib across the paper in a way that I don't think is possible.
Right.
Except, like, there's video of him doing it. But he's another guy I think of whenever I think of, like, the great pen lines. And look at this kind of loose, free... The shapes are there. We recognize that as a hand, but there's no attention to like, oh, I'm going to look at a hand reference. Let me take a photograph.
Yeah, so much of what the illustrators would do from back in the day is they would hold the implement in a strange way to achieve these funky lines. So they might hold it as far back as you possibly could to get like a mark on the page. And so there's a wobble that happens there, and there are lines that just you would not be able to get if you were holding it like you were taught in kindergarten.
Yes. The other benefit to me of looking at a book like this is like seeing the way he's kind of creating different textures and values and just mashing up lines together. Like this is all stuff that you could incorporate as a pen and ink artist.
When you were kids, man, there was always that kid in class who was so proud that he started to sprout a little bit of hair above his lip, and he never wanted to shave it because it took him 12 years to grow it, and it would look about like that. We called that the DTM, Dirty Teenage Mustache.
Yeah, very, very true. I bet everybody watching can identify the couple of kids that were like that in their school.
Yeah, it's the middle school version of the Kool-Aid smile that like little goofball kids would have in like first grade. And usually it might even be the same kids. The kid who had the Kool-Aid smile might have the DTM.
A lot of collage throughout this book, not just materials, but even like pulling things, I guess, out of magazines and just kind of putting them all together on pages or on canvases. But he also does this, where he'll put a note in Ralph Steadman's words in regards to a piece, a subject, a time period, materials. I find it so engaging, and it's not big, in-depth reviews of the work. It's just a note here or there. Not every drawing has that, which in some ways makes it better. When he has something to say, I guess, is when he chooses to put something in there. The lettering, too, is something that really pops to me in terms of some comic reference there, but just one more piece of beautiful line incorporating the artist's hand and one more element to play with on a composition.
And it's that kind of calligraphy that is like on the Declaration of Independence that you almost can't read.
Yeah. Yeah, and just lets things like, oh, the pen snagged, there was a piece of fiber in the pen nib, so the ink would just pour it out on that letter end. Love it.
Yeah.
And the contrast between these two drawings, right? Very clean lines here versus like, we're just attacking the page surface, probably ruining a couple of pen nibs in the process. You can see splatters, you can see bleeds, and then very controlled and tight here.
Yeah, insanely.
And I believe this is from a book, an Alice Through the Looking Glass, a book or a series. Did several books that are kind of like, I don't want to say adaptations, but almost like making an illustrated edition of these books.
Sure.
So you'll have series of drawings that cover the same material.
Yeah, and it makes sense, man. Those old like John Tyndall woodcuts from Through the Looking Glass, like they served generations worth of influence.
Also a nightmare quality to a lot of his designs.
Yeah, I mean perfect juxtaposition with Hunter Thompson.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Some fun stories in here too about meeting Hunter S. Thompson and working together, and some anecdotes that he experienced with Hunter S. Thompson.
It's an amazing collaboration because it is like the Hunter Thompson's the literary version of Steadman. Yeah, it's a perfect union.
Yeah, and personally they seem completely different.
Yeah.
Like outside of what you see on the page, it's like Hunter Thompson maniac, Steadman English gentleman. but somehow they made magic together. I linger on this because it's one of the most nightmarish images, again, that I've seen. And it's Disney. You know what I mean? It's kind of surprised we can even show this and talk about it. But it's almost pure Disney, and it's a nightmare. And again, back to the lettering, right? A guy that has all the tools, all the graphic tools in his toolbox.
Yeah, you know, looking at this stuff, I imagine Pettibone must have pulled some energy from Stedman.
It's another good reference.
I
And
never thought about it.
We have a nice Pettibone video for people who maybe haven't looked at his work that much through the lens of cartooning. Might be something to check out as a follow-up to this episode. And caricature, you know, having Nixon in these straight edges for background, really great stuff.
It's all in that nose, man.
Yeah, completely. You see some white media being used on these hands.
Yeah.
The contrast, Sigmund Freud, another series, I think he did this for a book, I believe, but did a series on Sigmund Freud, so you see several of those pieces in this.
It's more of biographical stuff rather than just people fucking all over the place.
Right. But again, with these almost abstract hands.
That's an incredible hand. Egon Schiele might be an influence that Stedman looked at when he was young or something.
One of the things I wish comics would talk more about is this kind of like line quality. You know, it's such a default of having like a slick, almost like a Dave Stevens kind of line. But look at the contrast between the lines of the hair versus like these lines that are making up that abstract hand. Even the smudge is kind of functioning like a line.
Yeah. There's Japanese calligraphy or like some of the, you know, the hokusai kind of would have those kinds of lines and things.
Pretty cool seeing them bring in texture and color.
Yeah.
Just as like an accent. I don't even know what to, it's overwhelming looking at this stuff. This is usually what happens to me. Like I'm getting ready to go to sleep and then it's like, okay, I got to put this down and look at something a little bit more, less interesting.
Yeah, totally. Like I've been having that problem a lot. Like reading before bed. It's like, now I'm inspired. How am I supposed to sleep?
Right. I used to always talk about like cartoonists that would make me want to draw whenever I'd be looking at their pages or reading their comic books. And that's the response I have to this stuff. It just is so much like, get on a piece of paper. I got to drag a nib across a piece of paper after looking at a few of these. I can't tell here, but I feel like there's maybe some airbrush worked into this as well. Yeah, it's a real mashup tool-wise. And again, he talks about his process in the beginning, and you get this sense of like he's got a studio full of art supplies and following instincts, making some marks, and then reacting to those.
Whatever the job calls for.
Ability to draw stuff very realistically, very rigorously, or just do it with one line.
Yeah, totally. And I think for like the more commercial stuff, I think he bangs that stuff out fast. And I think maybe there might be iterations. Like if you could bang it out that quick, like do 3 of them.
Yeah. Did a series on Leonardo da Vinci. That's what a bunch of these pages are. Love that. The white canvas is the middle of your piece. The scary blank canvas.
Yeah, so bright too.
How about that for kind of cool effect? Capturing a guy just working madly. You see all the pages around him, but how do you represent that in the actual drawing of the guy? And several faces bleeding over on top of each other.
Totally. And the candlelight suggests nighttime, so the guy's just been at it all day and can't stop.
Yeah, and to go from this portrait of Leonardo da Vinci to, I assume, maybe a political editorial type illustration here.
That ain't Phyllis Diller.
But quite a range, man. Quite a range just of your mental, the way you're thinking.
Collage elements.
A lot of that. Collage elements going from ink marks into figures, like bursting out of those. Cartoon language, you know, of like your clouds. Could be a Popeye fight there. Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, and like I said, we probably aren't going to go through this entire thing. It's about 500 pages, but it's a beautiful book in that regard because, like, full color reproductions of these things.
Yeah, no, that's got to be a Hunter Thompson.
Yes, a Dr. Hunter S. Thompson, 1982. Man, it's incredible how much these two, they're almost Jack Kirby and Stan Lee.
Right.
The two of these guys working together. As big as their careers are on their own, they just did something different whenever they merged together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder what he has to say, because I seem to remember it wasn't like the fondest recollections.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a little bit of mention. I think they met at like a Kentucky Derby or something early on.
Great book.
And,
Great
and
book, man.
Yes, I can't imagine like running around with Hunter S. Thompson.
That's one of those books that I read, 12, 13 years old, whenever I finally was allowed to use the adult section of the library.
I remember whenever I got like my first job after school and I'd be online, Hunter S. Thompson was writing for ESPN.com, which was just weird. I think he was writing for them whenever he died.
Mm-hmm.
So, like some of his last writing was published on ESPN.com, which is just bizarre.
.com money, too, at those days.
Yeah, I guess so. Would have been early 2000s, so whiskey drip. Some of this stuff is just pure comics. It just looks like this is just a cartoonist.
Yeah.
If this is the only image that you had to think about Ralph Steadman, you'd have a totally different impression of him. It's quite a range and quite a bit of confidence to be able to go so broad between these different styles.
Yeah, playing with colored inks.
And that's like a full-on painting.
All right. Yeah, very humbled in the presence of artists like this.
Yeah. 1988, 1985, I was going to say you can almost see what you were saying about, if you're working fast, you might do a series of these. And it feels like these two are almost the same image, same concept, and they aren't. They're completely different, but some parallels there, I think, visually. How about this, man? If he was ever going to do a Doctor Strange, I feel like this is your strange Doctor Strange backgrounds. No idea even what that one was for. Again, with the great lettering. So, digging a little bit deeper, a little bit more broad maybe than our typical influences, but I think every one of these pages has stuff that you could incorporate into your comics. And if your comics really can't accommodate a line or a splatter or maybe mixing media and color at all, maybe you should think about broadening a little bit in terms of what you can accommodate graphically.
Totally.
There's a ton of language in here that I think we could bring to comics. And some cartoonists do, for sure. But tell me that's not a better caption treatment than your just standard default version.
Right. And he's a guy, like, okay, this is a good example. Like, those are pretty accurately placed teeth and stuff. I get the sense that he could do proper croquis drawing, and that was always what you would read in interviews and stuff. Like you have to sort of know the rules in order to break them. And I think that he's very like a young Picasso, right? Like could do perfect figure representation, and then like gets bored with it and pushes it further. But I do think that his fundamentals are way more sound than like the little hipsters who are Ralph Steadman fans that just come in like cold like that and think, oh, you just do this and you make a cool thing. The roots and the foundation are there, and what the fun part about games really is the rules to kind of keep things in sequence. And I think he has a lot of fundamentals of the rules. I just had to see if that was the Cardinals in.
Pretty amazing going in from like these loose sketches and wash to then like a very detailed illustration in the middle of it. You know what? I lingered on this page because I wanted to read this quote. I always carried what I learned drafting with me. The pure straight lines and precision still fascinate, but I like to contrast them with chaos. And I think that speaks to the fundamentals that you talk about, Ed, of like what he can draw.
Right.
And it seems like he comes from that formal background.
Like, look at this. You don't see anything coming out like these are perfect lines, and you need 2 or 3 tools to do this, and to get these concentric circles like that where they're completely parallel. So he knows how to slang the ink compass, and the dot is right there. You can see where it is, where it all kind of comes out of and everything.
Yeah, there's a lot on this page. Like I was studying like this triangle, and then it's a triangle inside of a triangle with the parallel lines, like completing that shape.
Yeah, there's a name for that.
All of these images, by the way, that we've been looking at since this one are all part of something called The Big I Am from 1995.
It's fun because some of them look like they could be straight from Victorian times.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of a series of images that look so different from one page to the next, and somehow they are part of the same book, story. I'm not sure what that Big I Am was, but it was a series of images that fit together. One piece that's missing from this, in my opinion, is sizes. I'd love to know how big these pages are. Because that can be intimidating, I find, if you have a big piece of paper, but you're drawing with a pen nib. It's like a fine thread that you're putting down on this gigantic field of paper.
Right.
What do you think he makes these marks with?
Yeah, just like a big goopy brush.
Yeah, watered down ink or paint or something.
But then hits it with that airbrush, and then when you see that little piece, man, then Peter Cooper comes to mind.
Animal Farm, another series that he worked on. I guess it was an illustrated edition of Animal Farm.
A perfect artist for that comic. Man.
Absolutely.
Four legs good, 2 legs bad.
Yeah, absolutely breathtaking, some of these ideas. And a thoughtful artist.
There it is, man.
Yeah, the idea of kind of reading a text and then trying to pull illustrations that actually can carry their weight against a very good text.
The way it was done.
Not an easy task. That's kind of cool, piling in, the precision that he mentioned in that quote. You can imagine in a lot of these pieces, whenever you see collaged elements that are coming in, especially of like these just detailed engraving type elements. Polo is my life. Like, who thinks to add this?
Yeah, that's incredible. A little scoliosis spine. You gotta know what a crumpet is to play cricket.
And as we get into kind of these, this is late 1998 here. I think you see more collage. You see his evolution from the beginning of this video as we get further down the road. And then I think this is really interesting because he's combining, looks like photocopies of this cow, right? But then he's drawing on some of them to really differentiate them, but also, I think, to integrate them into the illustration overall.
And then he's using like square ass like ledger like graph paper to give you the charts and stuff. Like paper that accountants have.
I always end up with this kind of like, I'll get a couple of sheets of this in different weird places. Maybe buy a box at a flea market, or my dad will pick something up like that, and I have like the oddest collection of a couple pages of graph paper that I didn't even think of that would be like Economist or somebody that's doing business graphs. In my mind, every graph piece of paper is drafting, but who knows what that stuff is for. It's just like it's a lost industry or a lost method.
I mean, the place you would get that shit new would be like Office Depot.
If you read all of the under information too, you get a sense of just how broad his career is. Like, there's stuff for theatrical shows and things. So really a guy who I think is respected, and just a lot of industries want his artwork. A lot of book covers,
right,
and a lot of editorial.
Yeah, I bet his day planner's crazy.
Can't even imagine. Because he does seem to work very freely. So, like, I don't know how that works within a freelance capacity. I guess maybe you get a job and you just start thinking that way. Whatever that job may be. Reading, if it's, if it's editorial, or if it's related to some kind of a book publication. A little bit more traditional drawing. You can see some of his, probably going back to 30 or 40 years whenever he was learning figure drawing. But you see that crop up a lot. Obviously, people are the subject of most of his artwork in this book. So you get a chance as you go through to kind of see how far he stretches the figure drawing part of what he's able to do. But then he can go very simple in these hands. Look at that face.
Yeah, man.
He does a lot of this circle piece, and I don't know what that's from, because it doesn't look that easy to make. He does it a bunch, and I wonder if that's a template that is like almost a rub off or rub on, whatever that would be. Fun whenever he does color. But again, that's a photocopied shark head, that's being repeated, but integrated, really pushing it. It reminds me of like fair use or something, where it's like clearly whatever this comes from, this is a different treatment.
Yeah, I mean, it's seamless. Like you don't even know where the edges are.
Taking advantage of that line to create forms then that you would add color to. And I wonder if some of this is, if there's a digital component at some point in the process, because that looked like very flat reds. So maybe it's ink, maybe it's paint.
Those dyes, like when you put down Doc Martin dyes properly, like they are very flat. Like
About
on the illustration board.
Fahrenheit 451 illustration.
Makes sense.
Yeah, radical.
There's that repeating image motif that he was using at this period.
I think photocopier is something that he lists, like whenever he's talking materials and stuff. I believe he has a photocopier in the studio there. So you do see some of these either repeating images or stretched.
Yeah.
Like using it as a tool and seeing what you can pull out of it.
I don't know that if you saw on Steve Rude's page, he had his daughter take photos of him while he was talking to us. So she's kind of like behind him, kind of stage left. So behind where the computer was, where Zoom was, you see Steve Rude's Xerox machine. It's right behind, where he was talking to us.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. This is 2005.
Is that Philip Seymour Hoffman? No, that's not. I'm sure it's not.
How about that for a landscape? Made from a backing paper from my drawing desk, so it's completely random.
Yeah, it looks like a no man's land.
Yes.
Like those areas, like you heard that there are like those areas, like whole chunks of France that just cannot be touched because of munitions and artillery and shit.
Yeah, totally. Top-hatted gentleman. One for him, I think.
Slash?
Yeah, record cover sleeve artwork. And it's probably some of these portraits probably part of what made me think of Al Hirschfeld looking through this and kind of trying to think of who else does this kind of work.
Right.
I know that stuff's different, but at the same time, it's portraits.
Totally.
Portraits in ink.
Yeah, there are those great portraiteurs who were in like Playboy in the 90s when we were kids. And probably like for a long time, before that would do those like single image, big illustration. Walter White.
Yeah. A couple of Breaking Bad pieces for the DVD.
Oh, that's Mike?
Yeah.
That's Mike Ehrmantraut.
That's right.
Them eyes, man. Better Call
more.
Saul.
Saul Goodman.
Odenkirk's a comic book guy. I was listening to the Klaus Schute interview, and we were talking about the catalog that Klaus put out that people can order original art, and he said he kept all the names and info, and Bob Odenkirk, it's only years later he's like, oh man, Amy Poehler, like, those were some of his clients, his patrons.
It'd be very interesting to see a list of that. The people that are buying up comic art, the people
in the
that
90s and stuff.
Might not think about. I feel like Janine Garofalo was a fan of the alternative comics, and of course Patton Oswalt, comics fan. There's quite a few of them out there. It's funny too, like wrestlers, you see, what used to be like secret comic book fans, now you can kind of find out about. It's not as much of a secret anymore.
Yeah, man. Corey Graves, or as we know him, Sterling James Keenan, hang out at my mama's house talking Preacher comics for hours on end when we were kids. All
right, so that's kind of the overview of this book. If you want to benefit from this book, it's really something that you just need to spend time with.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like these pictures are many of them worth 1,000 words each, so you're not going to get it in just a flip through. But it's a pretty damn nice collection. I would often get Stedman books out of the library. Mm-hmm. So if you have a good library system, you might find some of his work there. But again, I think if you're a cartoonist and you're trying to think about graphics and lines and ink, you need to spend a little bit of time looking at this guy because like he pushes that boundary aggressively.
Yeah. Big bibliography of those kinds of books, man. There would be the kids at art school whose main influence was Stedman, and I know dudes that had this amount of books, half dozen.
Yeah, he's definitely got a big amount of shelf of the books that have collect his artwork. So not a hard artist to find, but definitely one that is worth everyone's time.
Good to go.
I am.
And you just want to do that eerie one?
Yeah.
I bet we could squeak it in there.
Yeah, it'll be another one of relative speed, although this is a nice book, so we'll point out a couple of the highlights in this. We're going to be looking at Eerie Publications, the complete covers, and Fanico is your publisher, which is like the new Fanico
right
version. I might zoom in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And tell me that it looks nice on there, and I'll lock it in, because it's very fuzzy.
Yeah, it looks good on here. Yep. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
And it is Kayfabe-tober. This is the list of prompts for 2023 Kayfabe-tober. And if you have not been following along, you can jump in on whatever day it is today, but you can also look for the hashtags and see what our talented audience is putting out there. And if you guys do participate in Cartoonist Kayfabe-tober, be sure and tag us so that we can see it and so that other people can find it easily. We also have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon with 3 different levels that'll get you access to our videos early. And if you are a King Kayfaber, you will get all of our videos first. You will also sit in on our recording sessions, so you'll know which books you want to track down. You'll be the first one to go after those in the aftermarket before they either disappear or go up in price, something we call the Kayfabe effect. And we are a daily comic book YouTube channel, which means we have about 1,500 videos in our back catalog. You can search those on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage and probably find the books or creators that are your favorite. So check that out if you're new to the channel, and whenever you find that video you love, be sure and share it wherever you spend time online. All right, Ed, we are looking at Eerie Publications, the complete covers. I don't know if it was last year, maybe around Halloween, we looked at another book on Eerie Publications that was also by Mike Howlett. This is a black and white magazine publisher primarily in the 70s. I think they actually start in the late 60s and go to the early 80s, but basically a 70s. Think of Warren at the very cheapest, most rip-off, bottom feeder level. Like, these books were published with almost no budget, and the budget that they did have was spent on the covers, and that's what this is a collection of.
Makes perfect sense, because that was the B movies of the time, right? Roger Corman will always talk about that. Like, put half the budget towards the poster, and then make a movie.
That's right.
Around that.
That's hilarious. But that is exactly what you have here. And Mike Howlett is just a huge Eerie head, apparently. So he has, the covers are shot from his collection, but he also has stuff like original art sprinkled in. And one of the things that Eerie would do, something they were known for, was reusing artwork.
Yeah, of course.
And so whenever that comes up, there's a very good notation system that'll point to this was the first appearance and now it's cobbled together. Sometimes it would be jamming up a couple of covers together, or just painting in a new figure in the background, or zooming in on the cover. This was done by a longtime magazine publisher, and what those guys would do is chase trends.
Yes.
And so whenever the publisher saw that Eerie was, or Warren magazines rather, were having success as black and white horror comics, decided to jump on that and hired Carlos Burgos as the editor for these comics. And so a lot of the covers, especially initially, are Carlos Burgos, starting with the very first publication. And these covers are arranged in the book chronologically. So you'll see April 1966.
Bob Powell on that cover.
Yes, Bob Powell. There's a handful of guys that are used to Bob Powell again on this third one. There's a handful of artists that will be used, and they're profiled in the beginning. Like, this background material kind of goes through and talks about maybe 6 or 7 of the main cover artists.
It's amazing, man. I had no idea that Carl Burgos had the proficiency with illustration and paint that he did. You know, I have reprints of Marvel Comics 1 with the Human Torch feature, and it's very raw.
Yes.
And this, you know, it's pretty accomplished for what it is.
Keep in mind, this is not Carlos Burgos in the foreground. He's painting in this figure in the background. So this is how the cover looked when it was originally printed. It's funny because they'll come back to this a couple of times and keep monkeying around with it. But that's what he would do. And it was just like, get a cool cover that's striking. Let's reuse it.
And they're even using like the Frazetta palette with some of the dark colors and things that they're all putting in there.
One of their pieces that is on a lot of covers is this like paint splotch, blood splotch, where they would have their title lettering. And one of the standouts as we go through here is the great lettering that's used. It's some of it looks like fonts that would have been available commercially at the time. Some of it's hand lettered, but it's probably some of the most creative parts of this publisher are these little blurbs in terms of the font and lettering that appears in those.
Yeah, another one of those exploitation tropes.
Yeah, and exploitation is really the name of the game, but they hit on stuff. You know, that's a fantastic graphic. The 4 eyes that kind of make you think that something's wrong with your eyesight.
Yeah, it's like tattoo flash.
Lady with her legs torn off and our werewolf eating those right in front of her. It's extremely exploitative. You'll see like a lot of the women, you know, they're in some state of undress or rags showing off their bodies while, you know, a humpback is sewing Frankenstein's head on something else. It's funny, keep this one in mind because we're going to see this reused in another cover where it's like 2 covers are mashed up. So cut this out and add it to the background. And it's so crude.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see...
that was Carlos Burgos.
The paint even looks cheap.
Chick Stone.
Wow.
So you go from
my favorite Kirby inkers.
That's what go from inking at Marvel. I mean, this is the 1969, so the guy's working at Marvel as an inker, but then moonlighting with some of these covers.
Yeah, I think he had a tough career, man. He was doing some of the Tower Thunder Agents and stuff, and I'm sure those didn't pay for anything. Man, he did a lot of work for this publication.
Yes. Especially early on, this time period. You know, they kind of go through phases. Whenever you'll find some cover artist will work, you know, it'd be like batches almost, like, oh, this guy was in favor.
It's fun because it's really just illustration, and then like paint is used like for color.
Yeah.
It's not really painting.
I did not realize there were as many of these as there are, because I see these once in a while, like maybe in a busted up magazine box. You'll
Right.
see a couple of these, and they always pop. You know, they definitely nail it with the cover in terms of, if you saw this on a rack with other magazines, these are going to pop out. Bright
Right.
colors, big logos, easy to see. They always stand out to me, but they ran a lot longer than I realized.
Totally, man.
How about this for just pure graphic madness? A cover.
Yeah.
You know, a
Yeah, that's
cover
good.
of that woman's head being chopped off with an axe.
So it's all sizzle, no steak, because when you crack these open, the artwork is not even like, there's nothing interesting about it. It's just terrible.
Sewing a head back on now. You have your deheaded mermaid monster something there. Let's put a new head on it.
That is one of the guinea pig flicks, by the way.
Makes total sense. And then like referencing things like this weird mysteries cover of the brain being removed. I don't know if that's true, but certainly it looks like maybe somebody was copying something
Right.
there. How about that? Going through the meat grinder.
Yeah, totally. And we're starting to approach like the person who'd painted this one was shown some of the Jack Davis from Warren and was like, okay, I'll do my best.
Yeah, Bill Alexander is that artist, and he does a big chunk and then goes away for a little bit for like 7 years and then comes back. Original art. So one thing that's mixed in here, this is original art from the collection of Bob Murawski, just the collector as far as I know, but several of these pages will be original art depictions, who I guess the author, as a fan, has kind of tracked down some of that stuff, and that's pretty neat to see. We're going to start to see, whenever people get cut open, gears inside of them. And I wonder if that's pressure they were getting from like distribution of like, hey, we don't want to see the head cut off and blood oozing out, because this happens again and again now going forward. This is your cover image. It's always great, like seeing the comic book the drawing table there and some comics worked in.
Yeah, with some jargon too. Panel.
Yeah. Yeah, the colors are really great. You know, it's a pretty nice range of colors, even though it's predominantly black and high contrast.
When
You're
you
still getting a lot of color on there.
Yeah, when you see those colors that like that brightness, it makes me think that this like straight out of the tube kind of color.
I think that's probably true, because it's also probably like acrylic or something that's fast drying, so that they can just like turn these things around.
Yeah, this is not oil.
Several of these in an afternoon.
Shouts to Barnabas. A little Barnabas with a little Christopher Lee.
You know, it's funny, like seeing that blue treatment, Brendan McCarthy springs to mind.
Right, yeah, Rogan
Even with
Gosh.
like the little bits of highlight and stuff on there. And you wonder about the person who's collecting these, because they repeat things, and that's called out here. So you have somebody who's obsessed over it, but who was collecting these back in the day?
It's a big world, man.
And I wonder, like, were they keeping track and being like, wait, I think I've read that story already. So here's an example of they're reusing this cover. This was an earlier cover. Her leg was like compound fractured and a bone was sticking out. Half of her face was ripped off and a skull was sticking out earlier. And you see like one of the things that they do there, touch it up, you know, like paint over that. So little bits of changes. There's a bat added above your vampire. Haircut is different on your vampire.
He goes from Christopher Lee to Jackie Mason.
And I feel like it wasn't enough time for the styles to change that dramatically. But you'll see it a lot as we get further towards the end. It's like all just reprinted covers. You know, it was just take another bite of this pie.
This looks like it was done in an hour.
Yeah. One of the rare ones that doesn't have the kind of the blotchy.
We might be updating, huh? Let's see. Nope.
How great is our headless mummy? Such a great scenario too of like, we just want to have eye-catching horror.
No, right.
You know, it's not, I'm sure there's no story inside of this with like the green assistant feeding drops of blood to his vampire in a test tube.
That is arresting though. Like
It is.
Like it makes you fantasize. Like as a kid, you would see that and you couldn't wait. You just imagine what that story must be.
Do you think we ran out of deadline time and didn't get to the mouth on her?
Pretty eerie.
I don't see any other red paint on that cover, so might have just been not enough time. And then you have this stuff where it's like cartoon.
Totally, and I think that's once again that when you see that, that's the sort of instruction is Jack Davis. Here goes your gears.
Yes. Yeah, it's very Jack Davis, that face.
You would think that in the 1970 that they would be less pussy-ish, you know? Like, of course, in the 60s, you still got some sting from Comics Code Authority and all that stuff, but you'd think that they'd be less wussy.
Another use of this cover, and this time we're actually cutting that. When I said earlier, remember this lady in the tube, just cut out and pasted up. So now you've got 2 covers from before. Don't have to pay a cover artist this month. Let's just get it out there. Yeah, it's kind of amazing whenever you think about the cheapness of what these guys are producing. And this goes into the 80s. This is not 1950s of fly-by-night trying to make money. This is like 15 years of publishing this stuff, presumably making money along the way.
There's a legacy at this point, man. If you go to Barnes & Noble, go to the magazine section, there is this Kayfabe company called Warrant.
Yes.
That makes these, and I don't know if it's like reprints from Warren Comics, but there's like a Creepy, there's an Eerie, and there's a Vampirella. I forget what her name is, but it's almost like Barbarella or something like that. But like, it's persisted. The Warren influence and all the knockoffs and stuff, it's persisted to this very day. You could go see some versions of this right now, and I think they actually do somehow get access to Frazetta covers for that. I have no idea what these things are. And I mean, Barnes & Noble is plentiful. There must be tens of thousands of these magazines, per issue that are out there. But nobody talks about them. They're just, I don't know. It's a mystery.
Yeah, if they keep doing them, presumably they have some audience somewhere. Wonder if that audience is outside of comics. Because that's the other thing that happens is like sometimes you find these things and the overlap isn't there.
That's true. Like Faust Comics, like Metalheads read Faust Comics. And then when you go to the Metalheads house and you check out their inboxes, I mean, their long boxes, it would be like you would see stuff like Miracle Man in there.
This stuff feels so out of time. You know,
yeah,
like this is a pulp art cover.
Yeah, it's like
there's a bunch of these. They show the originals or the original publications, and like this is 1964. So even at that point, it feels like it's a little bit past its time when this style would have been like 30s or 40s for a pulp magazine, for example.
Yeah, totally.
But you see a ton of these where it's just art that was run elsewhere. And then there was a brokerage firm that they would get art from that I think dealt with a bunch of Spanish artists. So it's possible that they're getting it through them because this is some sort of foreign publication. But just as cheap as they could produce it, if the art already existed, maybe you don't have to pay as much to run it a second time. From a film still?
Absolutely. This is very famous stuff. You would see those in Famous Monsters of Filmland. I forget what, was it Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or like a Hunchback kind of thing? But the photo of that face just fucking blew my mind.
I like some of the logos too. Like you have Weird Worlds here, Strange Galaxy here. They start doing the science fiction is what you're seeing with those.
That looks like lovemaking.
This looks like something where Dan Clowes would be repainting this or redrawing this.
Or Johnny Ryan.
Yes. Yeah, bizarre creatures. Like, what is he wearing? Very strange.
Walrus Man. Remember that one character is called Walrus Man from Star Wars?
Yes.
But then they gave him a proper name like later on.
Another one of these. Let's do a still from a movie.
Yeah, that's like a Boris Karloff mummy.
How do you get away with that? That feels like a total lift. It doesn't even look like they're really doing anything. They're not even colorizing it.
Right.
Maybe if you made that bright green or something, it would look like it's its own thing, but not the case. Also, the logo just doesn't even fit.
Right.
It's just a giant blank gray space on the top of your magazine. The part that's going to be visible on the newsstand.
Yeah,
don't
same
care.
with this one.
Don't care. No big deal. Just get it out.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that somebody cares enough to kind of corral all this material.
You know what, though? I love it that they do.
No, I do as well.
Like that other book that we
Absolutely.
looked at, the other book on Eerie Publications, same deal. Like, because if you bought these issues, you'd be horribly disappointed.
Yeah, totally. You know what it is, Jimmy? It's like
I think this is maybe the best cover in the book.
we make comics, and that's our contribution to this culture that we like. But like, not everybody's a maker, so there are like the obsessive curators, and that's what this Howlett character is.
And I'm glad for it because these magazines are not something I see much.
No,
if
that's
somebody
true.
wasn't put, I wish there were more of these books. I wish there was Charlton versions. I wish there were a lot more of these kinds of collections out there.
Yeah.
And this one, pretty pretty good quality, showing off the color of these things. That last cover that I said I thought was the best one. Fernando Fernandez is the artist, and it's again, once he shows up, then they get several covers from him. So
It sounds like such a kayfabe name.
it does kind of sound like that. But they definitely, like I said, had some group that I guess represented artists that they would work with for some of these jobs.
Man, now we're getting to the post-Hammer horror era, man, where you got like the candle wax red blood and super, super beautiful, Euro chicks.
Yeah, very bright colors. And also, give us these girls that have as little clothing on as we can possibly get and get away with.
And exploitation is the name of the game, baby.
And you see it, like whenever you see these multiple covers on a page, it means this is a reprint.
You're right.
Essentially.
See, and we're back to that Jack Davis.
Yeah, you're going to see more and more of those things coming up. It's going to get to the point. How about this? They published, this was another one of their publications, Crime Does Not Pay, which was the famous Golden Age crime comic.
Yeah, Les Gleason, huh?
Highly successful, ran for a long time. I don't know if that slipped into the public domain or if maybe you can't trademark a title or something. Whatever the case is, that comic goes away in the mid-50s, and here we are 18 years later. Let's use that. That's a good title. Let's put that out. And it's the same approach, man. Just salacious covers.
This is the eerie cover, and it's just cribbing the composition of an old cover.
Yes, but this is not an old. This is June 1970. It's published by the same publisher.
I see.
So he published all kinds of stuff. This publisher, it wasn't just eerie. You know how
He's
those
going
magazine
full
publishers
EC.
might have 20 different publishing imprints. Aimed at an older audience, but still the compositions. It also, you mentioned this is going full exploitation. So now we're in the mid 70s, and it's basically like exploitation movies, right, are everywhere. So this publisher's based in New York. They're probably seeing that kind of stuff, and as those movies become more rough, you got to keep up. That's what you're competing against. Those gotcha kind of poster art and everything. It's keep pushing it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it still looks like a vestige. It doesn't look like it's updated all that much with the contemporary exploitation. It still is rooted in pulp, really. It's still very 50s.
I do love that they have the saturated colors right out of the tube. Let's throw some purples on there.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit. It's almost bad painting, but
It
it's
is
the part
it is
that
bad
I like.
painting. Yeah, anybody who's classically trained would shit all over this.
Even by comic standards, it feels like if you were doing Frazetta, it would be much more dark and then have your highlights.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's just dump some of the tube paint out.
Yeah, or
make sure there's enough
isn't
red.
down.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys weren't moonlighting as doing Marvel Fireside covers. But this is pure psychedelic there. This is Bill Alexander, the artist from earlier. After several years, comes back and starts doing covers again for them. Don't know what he did in the in between time. Probably find it though. I have a feeling Dave Hallett probably
Not Dave
or
Hallett.
not
Mike, I think.
Mike Hallett
I was thinking
probably
the same thing.
probably writes about this stuff online too. I'm sure this is kind of tip of the iceberg for somebody that has this kind of collection.
Yeah, see the Sharon Tate movies and shit are coming out already.
So weird, like electricity. Let's paint a lightning bolt around our Frankenstein. That guy's just come to life. Castle in the background. It feels like the old movie sets.
Right.
You're just referencing whatever visuals existed for horror. And it's kind of almost before we get into the VHS 80s era. It's still that old gothic horror style.
Yeah, because that's a style unto itself, and there will be illustrations for a lot of those covers also.
And people being impaled, they are very graphic covers.
This looks beautiful. This is a different artist.
Oscar Novell, you are exactly right. So we're going to see a few more from this artist.
This guy has some chops.
One of the standout artists. Like I said, there's about 6 or 7 that are highlighted and profiled in the beginning of the book, and Oscar Novell is one of them. And this is his work too.
It's a cursed image right there.
I wonder if these guys would push each other as well.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any pushing. I don't think there's much consideration. It's a paycheck.
You don't think Oscar Novell shows up and then Bill Alexander's like, oh, got to add this green to my palette.
No.
Midnight Hag.
That's a good title. Such great lettering on these covers.
There's your original art for this cover. I wonder how big those originals are.
That's a good question.
I do love this stuff. Do you remember Ben Mara was doing some paintings there for a while and
Oh, yeah.
posting them on like his Instagram, and they'd be like kind of fantasy based
Right.
stuff. They remind me of some of this stuff at times, and I just find it really, really attractive. So this is the cover image from the previous Eerie publication book that we looked at, and that is Oscar Novell, the artist that you said stood out, and it does is much more I don't know, attention to detail and more lines. And
He
things
just
like
has
that.
more construction. Like, it's just better drawing. He has a better understanding of the figure and stuff.
This original art, almost all of it, I think, is coming from this one guy's collection. It makes me wonder, like, what else he's got and where he got all of these.
I wonder if it's a geography thing, like that one dude that has all that caliber stuff.
Might have been connected to the publisher or something.
Right. Ooh, Killer Croc.
This is your Oscar Novell, too, and that's a pretty disturbing monster face.
That's Harry and the Hendersons, man.
I often wonder whenever I see this stuff if they went on to do posters and things. Like if I've seen any of their work elsewhere, book covers. You know, I can imagine like cheap paperbacks, pulpy paperbacks having this kind of a cover treatment.
You know, like if it existed this long, there had to be some big willie that did an interior strip that became a cartoonist of note.
Oscar Novell. So again, this artist, maybe the last guy that we're really going to look at in this collection. Look at the contrast in how he handles women versus like the monsters that you see. Like it's such a smooth, like polished.
Right.
Again, probably doing comics or illustration work way outside of this kind of genre.
Yeah.
But that's just what he brings to this one.
You know what's interesting with the Bob Powell and the Chick Stone stuff in the early run? It's kind of like the Jim Warren formula too, where like you get the first issues of all of the great Warren books, and
So violent.
and they have great creators, but then they just outsource the stuff later on, and you get like an Alex Nino or like an interesting person here and there, but it falls off rapidly. Like the best these publishers could do is Chick Stone and Bob Powell. That was the top of their budget.
Yeah. Yeah, and probably also, who does Carlos Burgos know?
Carl. Yeah, he was doing that Captain Marvel comic.
Yeah, I'm sure that's part of it is just like, who are we close to? Maybe even sharing studios with some of those guys.
Right, and it's Bob Powell, it's Chick Stone. It's kind of like, it's the Also Ran crew. That's so messed up.
Yeah, it's wild stuff, but just repeating everything now. You know, all of these are different publications, same covers. Like, we're not even changing the covers anymore. Maybe change the type on them or change the lettering, but it's like just repeating at this point as we like run out the streak.
Yeah, it makes you wonder,
Look at this.
how that stuff works. Yeah, dude.
How much hyperbole can we squeeze on there?
It's almost Japanese in its construction, like a Shonen Jump or any of the magazines. So I guess
kind of love these. I wish a few of these were at full page size because it's overwhelming at this tiny size loaded up with stuff. But I do kind of love just how much you're putting on that cover. It is pure stimulation.
the Silver Age Marvels were that way. With all the
Yeah, I
lettering,
love that lettering too.
And all the mania, you know, is totally a part of zeitgeist.
100%. And here we are just limping through the early 1980s. Howlett leaves spaces where he thinks there are probably could be issues that he either has never seen, hasn't come across, but it's almost like based on like,
see.
oh, there might be a couple of months between these two or the numbers jump. Like there could be, you know, something may exist here that we haven't found yet.
So we've just looked at all the covers for Eerie.
Everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's completely incredible. I don't think I realized that, because like we could have up front said that it was like those like, who's that guy that did those photo journals of comic covers? You see them in the back and eyes, you know, like
I'm not
going
to pull his name. I see those in a lot of comic shops.
Right. So okay, that changes the context for me. Like I thought, like of course we're getting a big sample, but the complete run that's
All of
super
them.
rad. Yeah, there it is, right
covers. And like I said, possibly there's an issue or two out there. You know, the author does imply that he believes that could be the case just based on the publication frequency and things.
That's super
where like
fun.
there are gaps in months here or there. Cool book though. Like I say, I love that this stuff exists. I wish there was more of it. Not for Eerie Publications necessarily, but for some of these publishers that are gone. Like we've gone
Totally.
through hundreds of publishers in the history of comics, and so few of them are represented, especially in a way where you could just get a book and kind of see their catalog.
Totally. Yeah. We need this. Charlton. Let's do that one next.
I'd love it.
Let's go, guys. Good to go.
I am.
Excellent, Jimmy. Making good time.
That's 4, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, you're done.
All right. We'll see you next week.
All right, man. I got. I guess I won't need to keep it plugged in to do just 2 videos.
Oh, dude, I was so worried that we missed a video because that start and stop in the beginning of the.
Yeah. You
I ended
just
up
got
with like a few of those, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, where's the third one?
Right. Oh, you know what, man? That was a story I wanted to tell on the channel. Maybe closer to a November 5th, like when it's the true 5th anniversary of Kayfabe, where when I recorded the first episode, the Wizard one, and didn't know my way around Filmic Pro all that much or anything, and so like you left, and there was about 20 minutes where I was in fear that we didn't get it because of the way Filmic Pro saves it within Filmic, and I was expecting it to show up in my photo reel or whatever it's called on iPhone products. So I actually didn't think we got it for 20 minutes.
Man,
That would have been the end. Like the channel, we probably would have been so demoralized
that would have been tough.
that
Hey, did you send me a? Oh, got it.
the Steve Root inertia would have not been in our favor.
It's true. We've had, and I part of me hates to say this out loud. We've had a good track record of
Yeah.
not losing too much.
Yeah. I did that word balloon thing with John Suntress this past weekend, and he lost a Denny O'Neil interview.
Is there a plug-in
Yeah, I
somewhere?
had to bring it so you can use
gotcha.
it. You can use it. Yeah, he lost a Denny O'Neil, and I think he lost a Gene Colan. They had to redo a Gene Colan joint.
Well, at least he got to redo it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, with both of those guys, you lose something, and that might have been their last interview.
Right. I got that new phone and I'm trying to touch it as little as possible until my Amazon order comes in with the screen protector and all that jazz. But we're finally going to update some technology. All right, guys, so this is going to be... You're going to get your money's worth here because we're going to talk just broadly about the Conversations series that University of Mississippi Press put out. And you could probably do a Google search right now if you're not too familiar with these books. University of Mississippi Press just does these anthologies of interviews with famous cartoonists. That it began with Charles Schulz, but there's 2 or 3 dozen of them at this point. It gets pretty contemporary. There's Matt Kint and Jeff Lemire Conversations books, but it runs the gamut from comic strips to like I said to modern day dude. Kirkman has a Conversations book, so we're going to do a broad conversation highlighting a couple of these, and that'll be that. I'm going to run to the bathroom real fast.
I was at my parents' this past weekend, and King Kayfaber's, man, I tried to find my crow costume picture. I was looking through photos, and my family photos are very unorganized. It is a box that covers 40 years of photos, and I just can't find that damn photo, and it's so frustrating because like I've seen it. You know what I mean? Like
so it's
I
there.
thought it was at my house,
Yeah.
and I've looked everywhere there exhaustively. So I figured I'd check at my parents when I was home. I just don't know. I haven't. It's a mystery, but. And then like when you think you remember where something was and it's not there, then it really starts to just like destroy the brain. Oh man, I think dudes are already searching through all of the conversation stuff because it's not limited to comics. West Coast Dave is looking at the filmmaker interview books now that they have. Apparently, it is just a massive collection of these things. It's pretty cool. I used to love because everything was so rare. Like if I would get hold of one of these kinds of books,
Right.
like that's the only book I had. Now it's like you could probably go and buy 100 of these, before we even start recording. But like back then, it was like, I was like a starving like a sponge. If you would get hold of this stuff, it was just like hang on every word, read it twice.
I'm gonna get in here just because this will be the thumbnail. All different shapes and sizes. Of course, Chris Ware has to go all out with his.
We think he's just insecure, right?
And I went to go grab this, but I forgot to pee.
Oh, I remind you guys while we're here, I don't know if anybody's in the Portland, Maine area, but I will be there Wednesday afternoon. I'm going to check out Casablanca Comics. So if that's your store or if it's close to where you live, come on out, man. We'll talk comics for an hour or two. I'm excited to go to that store too. I went to I was in Morgantown on Friday with time to kill, and I'm looking up comic book stores and ended up finding that. I don't know if you saw pictures of it.
What'd you get, man?
I don't want to say because I'm in the middle of building a collection. I'll tell you off air. I should say it though because somebody might be able to fill in some gaps. But I went into went through their dollar boxes. It's a well-stocked store, everything like this. And as I'm checking out, I'm like, "Hey man, do you guys have any more like back issues, dollar boxes, anything?" And he's like, "We have 1,000 long boxes downstairs. Most of them are $1." And it's like, all right, here we go. And it's classic basement rows and shelves of long boxes, like the length of the building. And then you get to the very back of the one aisle, and there's like almost like a fruit cellar or something. That's where the magazine stuff is. I'm back there with my iPhone flashlight, like no electricity, far in the back, digging through stuff. But it got me excited again because like those stores still exist.
Oh yeah,
And it was
and it's
so
in places
unassuming.
like that. Yeah,
Like it was
the
on a
building
residential street. Like if I had spun around 360 view, it's just houses, just people's houses all around it. But it was turned out to be fantastic. So
Yeah.
I'm excited for Casablanca. Same deal. It's a store that's been around since the 80s, and it's like, that dude's got those old dusty boxes buried in the back. I don't know if I'll get to any of those.
Right.
But any of these stores that have been around 30, 40 years, like, they have treasures.
Totally. Lock me in, Jimmy.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir. Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Kayfabe-tober is upon us, and these are your drawing prompts for the year 2023. Make sure you tag us and add us and share your hard work online. We'll reshare as many of these as possible. We're a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos in our filmography. Go take a good search on the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube channel. Hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite episodes, and check out those episodes if you haven't seen them. Search for your favorite comics and check out those episodes if you haven't seen them. We have a Patreon that is supported by the King Kayfabers, who, at the highest level, get all of these videos before anybody else, and they're hanging out with us right now in a live stream recording session as we produce these videos. This is one of those episodes that will be kayfabe affected to some extent as we get into the University of Mississippi Press Conversations series for cartoonists. And right before you see a bunch of good names right there. But you could find some of these books very cheaply on the aftermarkets, your Amazons, your eBays. But it's the King Kayfabers who are getting the cheapest, the $3 copy of Robert Crumb Conversations, while you have to pay $40 if you are not hip to this. So Jimmy, I don't know how early you get into the game, but I didn't know about Conversations until the Dan Clowes one came out. That's the one that was on my radar.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And you see Ken Perel is one of the editors on there. You could find writings from him on Comics Journal, maybe in Comic Art too. He's written a lot about Clowes, so it makes sense that he'd be an editor. I follow him on X and often posts really cool panels and things like that. So a good choice for this. But this comes right out of what I'm saying there is this is legit coming out of comics.
Right. Well, what is funny though is like you can tell that like the content is so much more important than like the graphic design of the covers, because that might be Comic Sans, man. That's funny. Just the shittiest.
By the way, Kniff, that was my first entry point. And
Nice.
I found it at a Half Price Books, and just picked it up because it looked interesting to me. I of course knew Kniff, but it's a chance to. These things were huge. Like for me, finding interviews with a cartoonist, especially this in depth. How else do I know how to make comics?
Right.
Like this stuff was just like manna from heaven.
It runs the gamut as well. So you see what we have right here: Alan Moore, Robert Crumb, Chris Ware, Harvey Pekar, Milt Kniff, Charles Schultz, Carl Barks, Dan Clowes. If you go to the University of Mississippi Press webpage, there's probably 24 of these comic book conversations books, and it goes up to pretty contemporary times. Robert Kirkman Conversations, Jeff Lemire. I think there might be a Matt Kent one. So it's something that keeps going on, and has been going on for since the kind of graphic novel boom, I'm guessing. There's a format to these that sort of makes it the part of the conversation series, and one of my favorite pieces of each of these books is that we get. Is this one not going to have it? We have chronologies, so that's just a great way to kind of start things off by giving a very direct line, giving great context to important dates in the cartoonist's career. And you, from these chronologies alone, you may learn a lot about the cartoonists that you dig. And then when we get into the body of the proper book, all interviews are in chronological order. So beginning from the earliest interviews up to the latest ones that they have rights and access to. So it paints a pretty fantastic portrait of the artist. And one of the things that I always enjoy is to see them kind of forming their ideas a little bit more, and maybe even some would call it hypocritical, but changing their points of view as their careers go on and as they sort of like learn more and more about the form. So
How could it be any other way?
If you're lucky and you're not stubborn and rigid, like it that is the way.
Well, the flip side is even if you are opposed to personal growth, memory will become a factor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're probably going to get a bunch of range just even if it's not intentional over the course of time. I love these interviews that go like older. Like before there was really any language around comics. Like that Carl Barks one. Interesting. I think that first one was 62. Is he done drawing the ducks at that point? Like when does he?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's amazing to think like that would almost be a career overview, even though we think of that as like the early interview in this collection.
Yeah, totally. It's really interesting too because there's a whole introduction to just describe how we even get to know Carl Barks' name.
Yes.
So it's around the start of like Marvel Comics, like 61, when people start to make the connection that the good duck artist is this guy Carl Barks. It was mentioned in one of the Dale comics, like very dashed out, like just a quick mention in like one comic, and that sort of set things off. And then there were people that didn't live far away, like Glenn Bray, who didn't live far away from Carl Barks, were able to look him up in the book. And are you the guy? He was very gracious with his correspondence and stuff. So these earliest interviews, well, this is pretty great because it's Don and Maggie Thompson doing, the first big thing. And these zines and things, Comic Art 7, there might have been 50 copies of that. But the Barks fans are so deep that they go for everything. Like I was talking to a guy at Baltimore Comic Con. I bought it off the dude, Kim Weston, I believe is his name. And Kim created he sort of touched up a piece of Barks art that was unpublished, except for it showed up at about a 1/2-inch scale in an ad in an old Dell comic. So he blew it up and retouched it up to try to ink it and you color it using the Barks palette. And then he had this kind of like zipatone for the shape of the finger that would have been like Donald Duck's finger, and then drew through it to try to like show you what maybe it would have looked like using his best approximation of Carl Barks art.
Yeah, that's wild.
But with the zipatone letting you know that this is not the Barks.
Yes, yeah, that's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's deep, man. So with stuff like the Dan Clowes conversations, there are the pieces in here where we get into the process, which is fantastic. Dorsey Sullivan, 2002. This is where we get that idea of the 5% rule. Mm-hmm. Comics Journal 250, reprinted with permission. But the 5% rule that was kind of bestowed upon Clowes by Jim Woodring, I believe. And the idea is that when you're done, you have to do 5% more in terms of polish to get it to a place where it's beyond everybody else, man.
I was literally talking to Natalie about this yesterday in regards to a piece of furniture that we had somebody build for us. And I was like, you can see the difference here. Like this person is not doing that extra 5%. And I kind of explained the whole Clowes thing. But it's such an elevation. If you're making comics, for instance, it's such an elevation compared to I got it done in time by the deadline.
Right.
Versus I had a running list of things that I wanted to make sure I would go back to or think about while I'm finishing or if I had time. That 5%, it's amazing to put into your brain and think that way.
Yeah, absolutely. The Crumb stuff is fascinating because I think the first one is in 68. So he's kind of like a folk hero locally. He's a local guy. The earliest stuff that they're talking about in the earliest interviews is there's one store that is the distributor for Moe's Bookstore on Telegraph Ave is the distributor for Zap Comics and Snatch and a couple little things, and they're dealing with litigation right now. So all those comics were pulled off the stands. This is in the Berkeley Barb, so that's your free weekly that I think has persisted. I know that remember the Sharon Lynch that we drew that Pornhouse comic, like she worked for the Berkeley Barb. So Crumb is a phenomenon of sorts, but he's not worldwide yet. But then you get to the next one from like 72, and there are fine artists who like come to America, discover Crumb, and then are not like doing Crumb. Like the Meatball Curtain is like a piece of fine art that is done after these guys come. So like in just a very short amount of time, Crumb is getting bigger and bigger, and this is like Cleveland Magazine. So he's still kind of like becomes a cult classic kind of folk artist, and then things blow the fuck up for him.
That would be one I'd be really interested in for that time reason. Like that's a big piece. And then, what you realize, like the Berkeley Barb, it's like a reporter is talking to him. It's not necessarily like now whenever we get a Comics Journal interview with somebody where it's like, okay, a comics nerd is talking to him. Not at all. This is almost like maybe it's an arts reporter, maybe, who knows, culture reporter, whatever. But the survey is totally different as to how they're contextualizing it and having that conversation. Even for Crumb, it's not like I'm sure he was dealing with a bunch of comic book nerds regularly that were doing fanzines about comics. Like, it would have been a much different conversation than what you get now.
But we'll take it to the furthest extreme with the Charles Schultz stuff, because throughout most of these interview books, it was the Journal or Comics Interview, David Allen Kraft or whatever. When it comes to Charles Schultz, first off, he hits the ground running, and all of the interviews are coming from places like Saturday Evening Post, New Yorker, New York Times, like all of the biggest possible venues. With the most substantial in this book is the Gary Groth interview that spans, look at that, almost 100 pages.
Yeah, I think that's Wow, that's interesting because that's probably that Comics Journal 200, I bet.
It is.
Or it might be multiple Comics Journal conversations. I wonder
It's
if
the
he had more
one.
than one. But it also might be like an unabridged one or something because that many pages, man. I don't remember the Comics Journal interview being quite that long.
Right.
I guess it's formatted differently too. That's fascinating, though. Just having different types of interviewers, I think, is a really interesting feature in these books.
Absolutely. Bill Watterson at the very end. So that's a pretty sharp conversation to have, man.
Yeah.
L.A. Times, December 21st, 1999. So we're moving up towards the retirement, where I believe Watterson might have already been retired at that point.
I think that's right.
So we have two retired cartoonists speaking to one another. That's well, I guess it's more of an afterword kind of piece. In the Alan Moore piece, it starts out very, very early in his career. He might even still be doing stuff for like Marvel UK, and is making fun of Chris Claremont writing style and Frank Miller. Like really is like cold diss and Frank Miller. But he's talking about how much he loves Marvel Man and has an idea for a treatment of Marvel Man. And goddamn it, if that doesn't come to fruition,
That's one of the fun things with old interviews.
totally. Your humble host has a cameo appearance in this Harvey Picar
That Harvey Picar cover is amazing.
Conversations book. Yeah,
It's such a perfect picture for him.
totally. Because somewhere in the early 2000s, we captured a where is it? Yeah, it would be this Michael Rohde piece. Who is the curator of this thing, man? It was SPX 2005. That's the first panel I was ever on.
Wow.
And it was with Harvey Picar, Dean Haspiel, and Josh Neufeld. So we get a little bit of coverage, man. We get a little. Oh yeah, this is fun because Josh Neufeld drew the cover for SPX that year, and this is when the Harvey Picar, the American Splinter movie came out, and one of the promotional pieces was a little head bobble of Harvey. So Josh Neufeld drew this, and he drew us
That's cool.
as little head bobbles that are on top of all the books that we've drawn for Harv. So there's a little Eddie P right there.
Yeah, nice.
The Chris Ware one's newish to me, so I haven't gotten too deep. But the first interviews of all of them are great because it's there's no media training to and you can see I have my like little places
Yes.
where I stopped with each of these so far. So this one's from '93. That's very early in his career. It might be right around the time of Acme Novelty 1. And we get a pretty interesting impression of Chris Ware from the start. There's still the self-effacing stuff, but he hasn't solidified that character that much. But it's also clear that he has very strong ideas about the medium of comics and stuff. And he hits the ground running with his sort of meditations on the forum. So I know that there's a Seth one. I don't have that. And Jeet here said that's one of the great ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a Will Eisner Conversations. I don't have that one. I would bet that's pretty good. But that one online, it was, all of these things I got for a song, a couple of dollars. But the Eisner one, you can't find that for like less than 30.
Sometimes I feel bad whenever we look at something and it blows up the price. But the flip side is that means people didn't know this existed.
Totally.
And these are fantastic. I love seeing the Post-it notes too at different places because it's kind of how to read something like this.
Totally.
Like what mood are you in or what did you leave off with last night? And, you jump around. You kind of find the stuff that you need as you go through them. Pretty interesting collection. I'll be curious to see this collection continue to grow, like picking up the Seth piece or maybe finding a good deal on an Eisner piece. Something that I'll go into and kind of look through too, what all's available. Maybe fill in opposite gaps that we can pass books back and forth. There was a Kayfaber that sent in a Frank Miller book from like 1986, and it has 3 interviews in it, and they're from different eras. It's the same setup as this. Mm-hmm. And the first one is early 80s, I want to say, or late 70s, and Carol Kalish is the interviewer, the short time Marvel direct sales kind of sales liaison person, very highly regarded, but passed away very young. So I found that pretty interesting. I've been going through that this week, but it feels like it's right in line with this because you've got a young cartoonist. I'm sure now if Frank went and revisited that, he'd have totally different ideas on all of it. But that's the value of having a survey of like, these are interviews from 30 years, 40 years, across a career.
Yeah. So the inspiration for this video is this Carl Barks Conversations book because I I didn't really know that it was that broad of a series. You know, I would find some of these books, and you know, I thought that there was maybe just a couple of them, and I thought that they happened a long time ago. And when I saw the Coral Barks, I'm like, investigated a little bit deeper, and was like, wow, there's really way more of these than I realized. So then I had to scoop up really quickly before we do the video some of the other ones that I want to get to immediately. You know, the Schultz, the Crumb, the Ware, and the Kniff, because, you know, I'm in that comic strip headspace. But wanted to make it aware to the kayfabe audience out there that there are these, talk about an embarrassment of riches. There are a couple dozen fantastic books curating interviews with all of, you know, comics' most important creators. There's a Spiegelman one. It's more of this kind of format. I would hope that they graduated from this to this, because this is like, you could tell that academics came up with that. It looks like a goddamn classroom PowerPoint front page or something.
I like to imagine whenever it was time to do the Chris Ware one, Chris Ware being like, we're not doing that cover. There's no way you're putting my name in that font.
That's unbelievable. Just the shittiest thing ever.
That's so funny.
But it speaks to the kind of enthusiasm, right? Like it's the contents that matter, and then you just kind of shit this out. But at least this is a little bit more classy. The, you know, this period is a little more classy.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you can almost imagine like these are evolutions, right? Like this is probably the Schultz, the Kniff, maybe the first go around.
Totally.
And then it's like, let's put a little better photo on, you know, you get like these full bleed photos then and stuff. So yeah, that's interesting. That's, I guess, academia.
Yeah. Kniff really does look like the Martin Landau, Bela Lugosi from the Ed Wood movie. Doesn't he look like he was ready to suck your blood? He's got that gaze.
Yeah, it's a funny pick.
Good to go?
I am.
Cool beans.
Yeah, reading those in part is the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there becomes there's redundancy. Like with the poor Carl Barks one, there's lots of redundancy, man.
I've been trying to figure out what to do with that Miller one, because that interview is something we should do. So I might just finish reading it, maybe make notes, and then pass it to you for a week.
Do exactly that.
Yeah, because it's so cool. It's so early in his. They have APA pages printed in there.
I want to see that. All right, man. Let me pull out a couple of pages for this thing. So this is the Issey Sagawa manga, you know, the cannibal killer of Japan, and we can't look at much of it, but this is going for big money right now. You couldn't find one copy of it when that Vice documentary came out. It was just not online at all, and I swear it all, like since we talked about it, since we put it out, it started to kind of show up. And you can't get it for less than $200. Look, dude, it's Cold Heat. It's a Cold Heat
wondering,
comic.
like, it looks like it's 2-color printed, and I bet it isn't, because I don't know how you'd separate that art. Like, I can't imagine he was doing like 2 separations, you know, to be able to do this as 2-color. But it does look like it. Yeah. You know, if you planned, you could risograph print an effect that looks just about like that.
Yeah, I mean, it does look like one tool.
I mean, it's got to just be on one page. Although this looks like an ink line versus your color pencil, so I don't know. Maybe
Well,
there's something going on.
You know what it might be. I was thinking about it is like this line is the color of this, and it could be black, so it could be a gray, and then they just make it blue ink or something.
You could do that, but you'd still have your second layer then.
Right.
And maybe they did, you know, because maybe that's only a chunk of the book, or maybe it's after you got into it. It's so disturbing.
Yeah.
This is like your true crime episode kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah. That's my thought. Like it's like the true crime podcasts. Because like he gets attention on that kind of stuff, and we just got to make sure not to. Because like I actually think this is pretty cool looking stuff, and I think it's an awesome artifact to have just for like inside the mind of a psychopath and all that kind of shit. But we just got to make sure we don't praise him on the channel at all.
I wonder if it's so nuts. I wonder if they're like serial killers must have written memoirs and things.
Right.
Like when they're locked up, that would be comparable.
Yeah, totally. And my mind immediately goes to William, to John Wayne Gacy paintings and stuff. And there's controversy whenever there's like a new, Los Angeles art show with Gacy paintings or whatever. But I basically am inoculated and could give a fuck what anybody thinks as long as we get those hits, man. So basically, everyone could suck the balls.
Then I also wondered, did this guy do other comics?
He did, and we showed him off in the Japan Book Hunter stuff. And I'll bring those up as well, because with the other shits, you get a Genga. Looks so good on cam. I'm very excited to update the technologies next week, Jimmy, and see if there's noticeable sharper image. My phone's a terabyte, and the iPad is 2 terabytes.
Wow.
So I have the ability to do 4K, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stick to 1080.
All right, man. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
We're going to go true crime podcast today on the Kayfabe channel, but first we must let you guys know that Kayfabe-tober is upon us, and these are your prompts for drawing this month. Make sure you tag us, make sure you @ us. We'll share as many of these as possible, and it's always cool to check out what you guys are doing with those prompts. We're a daily YouTube channel, and we have more than 1,500 videos to offer you as of this recording. Go to the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube page, hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite comics, and we may have episodes about those comics, so check them out. We have a Patreon with several different levels of support. The highest level of support is the King Kayfaber option, and you get all videos before anybody else. Plus, you get access to this live stream recording session as we make these videos in real time, so get a leg up on the kayfabe effect that way. And in some ways, this may be a kayfabe affected book, because I've seen a couple of them pop up on eBay, and they're going for some big money, man. Only 1,000 produced. Maybe that's what this says. But this is Issei Sagawa, the cannibal killer of Tokyo. Had a Vice documentary in some years back. I think he came into fashion again after Casey Anthony happened. She gets off scot-free, and there would be all these articles about famous people who got off scot-free from things, and the top 5 people who got away from scot-free. That's where I first even heard about this cat. And there was a Vice documentary, Issei Sagawa, that kind of like laid everything out, and in true crime podcast fashion, right? Like you could find a million podcasts talking about this deal. Foreign exchange student, he's in France, sick fucker, kills a fellow student, eats her, puts her remains into 2 suitcases, takes them down by like a riverside, walks away from them, and immediately gets caught. Like some runners see the guy leave these bags, see that the bags are dripping. Hey, stop that guy! They get him immediately. He doesn't get anywhere. They're warehousing him in jail, and the people of France are like, we don't want our tax money be paying for this douchebag. And Nepo Baby, man, he had some family member that was a part of some political, had political sway in Japan. Some paperwork stuff happened, because this dude literally caught red-handed. in transporting him back to Japan, that classic, like, a couple of boxes weren't checked. Some shit happened. This dude got to be free the rest of his life after being caught red-handed, and became a celebrity of sorts, a D-level celebrity. He would be on shows. He would be like, who's the analog, man?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anybody that beat some rap and then went on to do...
He's more famous than John Gotti, because, like, this dude would be on shows, like, this dude would be on TV. He made porn, but in that documentary, they showed his manga. Now, this dude's dead. You grab this manga, you're getting it off the aftermarket. $0 go to him. We're not making that dude any money, and we would not do such a thing. But as a cursed object, as a kind of one-of-a-kind comic, we dig deep, man. And the first time I went to Japan, I was hunting for this because I was just curious what was going on inside of his mind, and what...
This is a cross between, like, Beavis and Pee Wee Herman.
Right. What I was curious about, man, was just like what's in this fella's head? Like what are these comics?
It is such an unassuming cover. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what this says. Maybe
Right.
it says, warning, don't read this.
Right.
Faint of heart or whatever. But just the cover image, you're not getting what you just described.
Right.
You're not communicating that to me from that cover image.
And out of context, it looks like he's winking like, I got away with it. I think this might say something, because this is now a wall book at Mandarake. This is a glass case book. And when we were just there in May, it was in the Mandarake Akihabara, and Brian Moss saw it and was like, yeah, I'll get that one. And so the girl, it's the only time we ever had an interaction with anybody at any store where there was a human response from the clerk, because usually it's very fast and snappy. Here's the book, boom, then they're on to the next. She pulls it off, and she either recognized the name or she read this and was like looked at us like we were fucking, like, are you sure you want this thing? And he's like, oh yeah, I'm sure. Now, he is that D-level celeb. Like, when he was doing those porns and stuff, like one of the pornos that he did where he's dressed up like the big bad wolf, and she's dressed up like Little Red Riding Hood.
Wow.
He fucks her, and then they interview her afterward, and they're like, hey, do you know who you just fucked? And then they tell her what the guy did and all the stuff that he did, and like, you see these ladies cry and shit. It's so he's D-level famous. Like, young people out there, they don't know who he is, man. So maybe there was something language here that made that lady kind of nervous. But we see the deal, right? He notices the derriere, and it's a sexual thing. Whenever I was out there 2 times ago, he died while we were in Tokyo. So there was like a lot of articles that were coming out at that time. And he was saying stuff in these articles like I don't understand why you don't want to eat your lover and things. Like he's a totally demented guy. There's a documentary called Cannaba that did the film festival circuit that is pretty intense, very uncomfortable. The camera is up against his face for 20 minutes as he's talking, and he's very old and elderly and just talking. And his parents, their parents, because he's got a brother, those parents fuck these boys up because, like, the brother does weird shit, weird self-harm things, and videotapes it. So it's a fucked up family.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if he did, like, how he lived without, I don't know, indulging in these impulses.
They saltpeter him. Like, he was, like, chemically castrated. He, like, agreed to some kind of thing. But he's heavily medicated and lethargic. So they hit him with that saltpeter, man. They're like, okay, you could be free, but you ain't ever getting a boner the rest of your life, man. That time is done for you, man. As you could see, it's this is, you know, akin to the John Wayne Gacy clown paintings, or, you know, that type of that type of imagery. It's very, very self-indulgent. These are considered doujinshi. Like I said, there's 1,000 of them. Oh, jeez.
That's interesting, the doujinshi part. I guess he didn't self-publish them.
Right. Yeah. There was somebody who kind of fronted the dough to maybe they saw these finished works and then decided to front the dough to make that happen. But I do know that Mandarake published something, and if you check out our studio tour with Koenji Shan, Japan Book Hunter, there is another publication that was sponsored by Mandarake, and with that one they had art shows, and with those books came a Ganga, an original piece of art, and Koenji Shan had 3 pieces of original art that the dude drew, and was certainly, interesting
weird.
artifact.
Because like whenever we've come across original art on here, like we've looked at Kirby pages and different actual like original art, we're touching it pages. I always think like you can almost feel something, like a connection to the creator, but like to feel something connected to this is like, like I recoil thinking about it.
It was all jokes, and like just I'm the Red Room guy. Like I have like a dark curiosity, so going out there like scooping the book up fulfilled that dark curiosity. But then I had the book, and then I go through it, and I'm like, this is a cursed thing. It was in the front room, but then I see this face staring at me, and I'm like, I gotta put that in the back room now.
Yeah,
I don't want to see him too often. But it gets, to a point of crudity at a certain point, but it's over and over again, just his indulgences in these like very depraved, it's far beyond, Robert Crumb's sexual fantasies of just drawing the same thing over and over again. He's clearly a very, very, very sick person.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre object. I think of these comics or of a book of like, oh, describe it in a sentence, and sometimes that's very hard to do. In this case, it's not hard to do at all.
Right.
But then like the description you're left with is kind of like, now I've got a million questions. Like, how does this exist? Who wants this? It kind of defies placement in a collection. Even.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's so different than like every other book that's in this house.
Right. Yeah. You ain't gonna get a second one of these unless it's another piece from him. But we are hunters, and we are connoisseurs of the comic book medium. So I placed it as a direct challenge when I seen that documentary, and I saw that he did manga, and I saw that cover. I watched the documentary because I wasn't too familiar with the fella's name, and in order to search it, the stuff. No, let me put it a different way. In the documentary, because like here's the other thing. When I typed in his name, the manga wouldn't come up. It was very obscure. And so like I had to go through the documentary, take a screen grab to show off, to try to find the thing. And I did not find it my first round up out there. You couldn't find it on eBay or anything like that. But the second round, Koenji Shan was like, I know spots. And he fucking, first day I met him, put that right into my hand, and it was all yucks. It was like, cool. Like, I made a discovery, man. It was a personal challenge. I traveled across the world, and I quested, and I got the object. But then I cracked it open, and I'm like, this is pure deviancy. This is inside the mind of a maniac. You can't go back from this, man. Like, enter with caution. You clearly saw that we can't be looking at every page of this thing. But in recent times, certainly thanks to sort of Koenji Shan adding illumination and some shine on this thing, but also the stuff that we showed off in our various manga hunts. This was included. Brian Wash showed off his. You could journey at your own risk, but right at this moment, you can find some of this crazy shit on eBay right now. But don't take it lightly.
It's an odd one, man. It definitely feels different than the stuff. We look at all kinds of weird comics, and probably some that if you were just looking at a page out of context, far more disturbing than what this is.
Right.
But the context, once you know it, it's hard not to feel something looking at this.
Right. like, you know, some weeks ago, we took a look at a comic that was by a genuine Black Panther, and we didn't know about it, so you put it under the microscope, right? There ain't too many comics out there that are done by deranged cannibals, right? So, of course, Cartoonist Kayfabe has to cover it, but we give no praise to the artwork. We give no shine to the craft of this thing. It's merely the fact that the comics is the distribution mechanism of this guy's crazy mindset, and the fact that it is a Tankobon doujinshi, that it has received the kayfabe treatment because of the odd factor.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one. I think of like those collections of like, you know, weird comics, whatever that.
Right, that Leather Nun.
Like I have several of those books, and then, you know, I want to track down the stuff that's in them.
Paul Gravatt would fuck with this.
And I'm kind of happy that this is your copy.
Oh,
because I feel like I'm satisfied. I don't need to do it. If I didn't know any better, you know, it'd be something that I would be. Had you not tracked this down, it would be probably something I'd be interested in tracking down. This is enough exposure for me, and I have a feeling our audience may feel that too. You know, like have a video like this. It's a fascinating piece of comics history.
It is 50-50. There's a Jim Rugg personality in the audience, but there's the Eddie P personality in the audience. And I'm gonna check the sold sales on eBay after this video goes live for 24 hours, and we'll see how many sick fucks are out there, man.
Oh, and I wonder how many of them are King Kayfabers.
You good to go?
Yes. Wow.
Check out this shit. I'm showing them some of the bad stuff. What were you wowing about?
Just all of it. Just the end of the video.
I thought somebody said something.
No, well, they, you know, of course they're out there looking and stuff. So West Coast Dave said there's several on eBay. Cheapest is 144. Average about 160 to 170. Yeah, it's a range, man. This will be one to monitor the comments closely.
Yeah, totally. Look at that wild shit. Like it's like the fat beads in the ass cheeks. Like it's a level of detail that you had to be there to know to draw that kind of shit.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I don't know what to say, man. That's not a reaction I have had to other comics I can think of.
Yeah, that'll be a big video, I think. And it'll be controversy, you know, get some roast job, but I'm done with being nervous about that any longer. I've heard it all. And we let it marinate a little. Like if I would have showed it off like as I got it, I might have sounded too enthusiastic in a way. Like, oh, dude, I got the thing, and that would just be the wrong tone. All right, man, hit it. Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell so that we can notify you when new videos are available. Kayfabetober is still upon us. These are your prompts for your drawings this season. Make sure you add us, make sure you tag us in those images, make sure we see those images, and we are going to share and retweet as many of these as possible. The videos are brought to you in part by the patrons. The King Kayfabers on the Patreon get all the videos before anybody else, thus mitigating the kayfabe effect. We are a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos at your disposal. We might have talked about some of your favorites. So hit the search field in the front page of the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Search for your favorite comics. Check out those episodes. But if we didn't cover your favorite comics, you have to let us know what those comics are so that we can push those titles a little bit higher up on our to-read pile. Ultimately, the videos are brought to you by the books that we make. Jim Rugg and myself, we are working and functioning cartoonists. This is a healthy blend of our bibliography right now, but we're making stuff all the time. And that time is now. The Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus is out in stores. Make sure you scoop this sucker up, man. It's the best book I ever made, collecting all 4 volumes of Hip Hop Family Tree inside of one handy gold foil hardcover with a bunch of new material. So even if you got those original volumes, there's plenty enough here to justify your purchase. X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback is coming to you in November, collecting all of my X-Men Grand Design works, and some of those volumes are out of print as we speak. I'm serializing a daily strip that is going to be coming out January 1st, 2024. It's called Switchblade Shorties, but if you're on my Patreon, you're going to get early access to those strips. Thank you guys so much for joining the Patreon. Received a whole bunch of feedback in the past week or two. I put out new strips every Tuesday for the early adopters to enjoy. Red Room has been the focus for the past couple of years. There are 2 trade paperbacks out there, The Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings. These are self-contained. These each contain 4 self-contained stories, so it doesn't matter which one you read first. But there's going to be a third volume called Crypto Killers coming out in January that I want to let you guys know about. Man, save $20 from your Christmas and Hanukkah loot and scoop up the Red Room Crypto Killers trade paperback. Jimmy, what do you got on the horizon?
Street Angel, Princess of Poverty is my next book coming out from Image Comics. It'll be out in November. You need to pre-order it now at your local comic shop or wherever you buy books or comics. It collects all the Street Angel comics that are not in Deadliest Girl Alive, which is also from Image Comics. They'll make a really nice set on your shelf together, and there's no overlap between the 2 books. So pick them both up. You'll have all the Street Angel comics. Hulk Grand Design. This is my contribution to the Grand Design Marvel project, and I believe it's out of print. So if you haven't added it to your shelf already, these copies are disappearing fast. Pick one up while you still can, because once it's out of print, no guarantee that it is going to be reprinted anytime soon. And finally, I've been self-publishing lately. True Crime Funnies, 3 nonfiction stories in there, including 2 wrestling yarns, the 1986 zine celebrating the greatest year in comics history, and the BW zine celebrating the black and white explosion in self-publishing comics and oddities from the 80s and 90s that I love so much. Those are all going to be available on my website, jimrugg.com, October 26th. I do have big quantities, but that is like my holiday fall sale. So if you want to add any of these books to your collection, that is the place to get them, October 26th, jimrugg.com.
It's imperative that you guys kayfabe affect the books, because that keeps the lights on in the studios. But there are some ways to directly support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Jimmy, let the people know.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can also pick up Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, mugs, hats, stickers, and more from our spread shop. That link is also under this video in the show notes.
There you have it. Several ways to keep these videos coming to you on a regular basis. Without further ado, Jimmy, please give the people their marching orders, and we'll be on our way.
Read more comics.
It's probably, it's... Man. This fucking technology, huh? We'll have those weeks where it's so good.
Yeah.
Kayfabers like history and the BW zine celebrating the black and white explosion in self-pub.
Good. On days like this, Jimmy, with the Kings, one of the things I was thinking was like we could promote doing like the mail just exclusive to the Kings, like just keep the shit rocking and bring the stuff on the table, just pull it off and just kind of show things off as we slide it out. Today's not the day for that, but that's something that we can add as value with the King Kayfabers. But it has to be like when we interview somebody at like 1 p.m. and we get done, pretty early.
Yes.
And have the time to do that. Maybe it's just a thing of like we could go through a couple of pieces until say 20 minutes before a big interview or something. But I just thought that's
a good idea.
That could be a piece of added value for the Kings to promote. And
I like it.
And it still is a part of our process. It's not adding much more to our workload at all.
For sure.
Yeah, so Kings, we're gonna get these videos situated. I will be sure to edit the Don Simpson conversation first, and deliver that to you guys as soon as possible. As per my stuff. But then I guess business as usual next Thursday. And we got a couple of guests on that one, I believe. Is that the 26th?
Yeah, who are the...
Should I say?
Well, maybe not. I don't know. We have two.
Well, it's one, and then somebody's coming in.
Oh,
at
gotcha.
The end.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Yeah.
That'll be a really good one.
And it'll be a fun thing to weave into the tapestry of Cartoonist Kayfabe.
I was thinking I had missed a...
No.
like, I run my schedule's so reliant on my calendar, so like to miss something, an update's like, oh no.
Right. Yeah, but super good times, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, have a good week. And it'll be almost, I guess it'll be a week and a half when we get back.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I read the first piece of Cosmic Odyssey, and I'm on board. I'm looking forward to it.
I have not, so I look forward to that.
I read that thing as a kid. This trade that I got it from '92. I read it on a family trip, like in the car. Like would bring a chunk of comics.
Yeah.
And that was one of them that I read like on the way down to North Carolina or something when I was like 10.
I feel like that's a classic trope. The comics on the car trip.
Yeah. All right, guys. Take care.
See you guys.